way towards the east and northeast. That being said, there will still be some outbreaks of showery rain across central eastern parts of England for a time this afternoon, and also across parts of northern England and Scotland. Quite a bit of rain still to come here, and that rain is going to break up a little bit, becoming a bit more showery perhaps, but it's further south and west where we're going to see the best chance of anything dry and brighter developing. And with that, temperatures up a little bit compared to yesterday, generally highs ranging in the high teens to low to mid 20s. As we go into this evening, and still some showery rain across parts of Scotland in particular. Some hefty showers are quite likely. Could even be some rumbles of thunder too, but also some bright or sunny spells possible. Also some heavy showers across parts of Northern Ireland and northern England too. I think further south across more central southern parts of England and Wales, it is going to be a drier picture. A few showery bursts perhaps, but also some breaks in the cloud leading to a bit of late sunshine. However, across Cornwall there will be a bit more persistent rain starting to push its way in, and as we go overnight, we are going to see more wet weather feeding its way eastwards across parts of England and Wales. Further east, holding on to something a little bit drier and some clear skies here, and also across parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland, most of the showers easing overnight and also some clear spells. But temperatures not dropping a huge amount. It is going to be another relatively warm night for most of us. Could be some early heavy rain across some parts of central eastern England first thing tomorrow morning, but that should clear away towards the east, and then thereafter just a few scattered showers around. It is looking like a drier and brighter day than today for many of us. A good chance of seeing some sunshine breaking through, and temperatures a little bit higher than today, and so feeling a bit warmer as well. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Don't miss your chance to win our Super Summer Giveaway. With your chance to win £30,000 cash, our biggest cash prize to date. Which means you get to spend every single penny however you like. What plans would you make with an extra £30,000 cash in your bank account? Take your family on the ultimate holiday, buy that treat that's always seemed out of reach, or just put it in the bank for a later date. However you'd spend it, make sure you don't miss out. For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text CASH to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2, or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threats on.
As time passes,
she could have said stump. You made my argument for me.
My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
It went everywhere.
Something practical could be done.
Or I can become something different.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
A very good afternoon to you and a very happy Monday. It's 3 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News. We're broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster, all across the UK. On today's show, Kamala Harris is in pole position to be the next Democrats nominee after Joe Biden finally sensationally quit yesterday. But is the VP up to the top job? Later in the show, she'll deliver her first major speech since Biden walked, and GB News will be covering it live. Next up, Microsoft has sensationally blamed the European Union for the world's biggest tech disaster last week after EU competition rules allowed CrowdStrike to access their software's kernel. Were Brussels responsible for a cyber attack that Vladimir Putin would have been proud of? And we'll catch up with all the latest day's royal news as the second in line to the throne, Prince George, celebrates his 11th birthday with a wonderful photograph. And that's all coming up between now and 6 o'clock. Welcome to the show. Always a delight to have your company. So much has happened in politics over the weekend, it's hard to know where to start. But a good starting point will be who's going to be the next president. Kamala Harris is likely to be on the offensive against Donald Trump as she puts herself into pole position. Maybe there goes this kind of gentler politics over the other side of the Atlantic. Did anybody think that would actually last? And an exclusive coming up in the show today. Last week, we revealed 1.65 million illegal immigrants had arrived into the European Union, 27 member states. Today, we can reveal over 1 million asylum seeker, first-time asylum seeker claims last year alone, a 66% increase in 5 years. And the report's author, Lee Evans, will tell me that the European Union's asylum problem could soon become Britain's small boats nightmare. Get in touch all the usual ways, gbnews.com/you'll say. But now it's time for your headlines with Sophia Wensler.
Martin, thank you. Good afternoon from the GB newsroom. It's just gone 3 o'clock. Your top story this hour. An 11-year-old girl has been left orphaned following a horrific crash which killed 4 members of her family, as well as 2 motorcyclists in West Yorkshire. Shane Roller, his partner Shannon Morgan and their daughters Lily and Ruby died on the A61 near Wakefield when their Ford Focus was in a collision with a motorbike. A GoFundMe page set up for 11-year-old Poppy, who was not in the car, has reached more than £31,000. The scene of the crash has remained closed while police investigations continue. Superintendent Alan Travis from West Yorkshire Police said this is an absolutely tragic incident which has resulted in the loss of 6 lives. Donations to the US Democratic Party have surged after President Joe Biden announced he's standing down from the US presidential race. The 81-year-old has endorsed Kamala Harris as Democratic candidate. It comes after the US president faced increasing calls to step aside since a faltering debate performance against Republican Donald Trump last month. And the news comes just 4 months before Americans go to the polls, upending the race for the White House. The Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, has praised Mr Biden.
A man who, during 5 decades of service, never lost touch with the concerns of working people and always put his country first. A true friend of the Labour movement, his presidency will leave a legacy that extends far beyond America to freedom and security on this continent.
In other news, the Prime Minister has set out plans to cut reliance on foreign workers by improving skills training in England. Skills England was a manifesto pledge from Labour and is designed to fix the fragmented and broken training systems. In a speech today, Sir Keir Starmer argued that a new approach is needed to reduce the need for immigration in key sectors. But the Conservatives have warned that the plans to redirect cash could slash the number of apprenticeships on offer. Meanwhile, the Conservative leadership race is gathering pace, with Shadow Work and Pension Secretary Mel Stride the latest Tory to hint at a run for the top job. Speaking to GB News earlier, he was asked whether he would stand.
I haven't ruled that out and I haven't ruled it in. We don't yet know what the contest holds. The party board is going to come forward shortly, I think, with the process, and I will finally take a decision at that time. Some colleagues have been speaking to me about that possibility and it's something that I'm weighing up.
Now, Israeli officials have announced that 2 more hostages have been confirmed dead after being taken captive by Hamas terrorists. Alex Danzig, whose 75 and 35-year-old Yagev Bukstab were abducted following the October 7th Hamas attacks on Israel. The Israel Defense Forces have told their families that their bodies are still being held by the terrorist group in Gaza. And the Prince and Princess of Wales have shared a new photo of Prince George to mark his 11th birthday. The image was taken by his mother, Princess Catherine, and posted on Kensington Palace's social media accounts. The black and white shot shows the future king smiling, wearing a white shirt and a dark blazer. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sophia Wensler, more in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Sophia. Now, we've got lots and lots coming up over the next 3 hours, so let's get cracking. And there's really only one place to start, and it's the fallout from a dramatic, huge weekend in American politics. And the US Vice President Kamala Harris will speak at 4:30 British time this afternoon. Of course, we're covering that here live on GB News. And it's less than 24 hours since Joe Biden stunned the world by finally conceding defeat in his bid to remain as president. And meanwhile, Secret Service Director Kimberly Cheetle is testifying currently at a hearing into the security lapses surrounding the assassination attempt on Donald Trump. Cheetle has been facing calls to resign, and we'll bring you developments from that as well throughout the show. Now, there's just so much to get our teeth into. Where do we start? Kamala Harris is in pole position. She hasn't yet, though, been officially anointed. The coronation hasn't happened. She is due to speak, though, in just over an hour's time. We'll, of course, have all eyes on that. And ahead of that, I'm now joined by our reporter, Mark White. Mark, welcome to the show. Mark, a huge amount to discuss here. She's already set her stall out, Kamala Harris, calling Donald Trump a convicted felon. The so-called unity politics didn't last very long, did it? But it's not yet a fait accompli. Mark, it's not yet a done deal. Certain big names have yet to come out and back Kamala Harris. Bring us up to speed.
Yeah, I mean, certainly she's had a lot of endorsements from senior Democrats and not so senior Democrats, running at about 500 or so last count. So a lot of people have come forward. It's for those that would like to see other candidates come forward for that Democratic National Congress when that takes place next month. The difficulty, I think, with it is going to be that it just leaves such a short period of time for anyone to credibly put forward a campaign that's going to be credible taking on Donald Trump. They'd have to raise the finance because they wouldn't be able, under electoral rules, to raid the finance funds of the Biden campaign. They would have to get a staff in place. So it's a really tough ask. The thing that obviously for Kamala Harris, going forward is concerned is that she does have that apparatus. She can, because there is a joint campaign committee between her and Joe Biden, use the funds that have been raised for the Biden-Harris campaign going forward. And it would be a much more relatively simple slot-in for her to just take over from Joe Biden and to run that campaign with whoever she decides to pick as her running mate. But let's see, we've got the Democratic National Convention Rules Committee who are going to be meeting this coming Wednesday. They will then decide on what the way forward for the convention is, and they promise that they are going to make that fully transparent, Martin. It will be live streamed so people can see exactly what their decision-making process is.
And Mark, it was believed to be Barack Obama, the final convincing factor that made Joe Biden finally see sense over the weekend. And interestingly, tellingly perhaps, Mark White, Barack Obama hasn't yet come out and officially backed Kamala Harris. He's the kingmaker, he's the godmaker in the Democrat Party still, all these years later. Is there any significance, do you think, Mark White, in his silence so far on this, or is this just procedure being followed?
Well, you know, he's someone that when he was in office was known for taking his time over important decisions. So it is possible that it is just something that he is waiting for a period of time before coming forward and endorsing Kamala Harris on. Or there might be something else afoot. We just don't know. The whole issue surrounding Joe Biden has been the most extraordinary drama of late that nothing would really surprise me. And I think there is a great deal of anger as well within the Democratic base. What they, to put it bluntly, see as a cover-up by the higher-ups in the Democratic Party and the administration, a cover-up of Joe Biden's sort of decline in health and his cognitive decline as well, that many within the base say they weren't made fully aware of. But of course, in that debate against Donald Trump, it was laid bare. It was just agonising to watch, and there was no way back for those that have been accused of being part of this cover-up. You cannot say that that was anything other than an unadmitted disaster for Joe Biden, and it did show some serious issues surrounding his health and cognitive abilities.
And the other people on the ticket, Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, he said he's unlikely to stand against Kamala Harris. Likewise, Gretchen Whitmer, the governor of Michigan, said they won't change. They were the other big names on the ticket. And then, of course, the conspiracy theorists go into overdrive. Why hasn't Barack Obama announced? Is it because the former First Lady, Michelle Obama, could be a bombshell surprise on the ticket, Mark? Or is that kind of psychodrama not likely?
Well, certainly sources in the States that are better connected than me are suggesting that is not the issue, that she is not intending to put her name forward at all. So, you know, things can change. But at the moment, there is no belief that Michelle Obama is intending to run for office. You were mentioning those names. Another one is Josh Shapiro, of course, the governor in Pennsylvania, who acquitted himself very well indeed during the tumult over the assassination attempt on Donald Trump. Of course, it was his state, and he was straight out of the traps, condemning that, offering his assistance and support to the former president. Well, he has also endorsed Kamala Harris, and he has been looked at as, we're told, a potential vice president for Kamala Harris should she go forward. Of course, he is in a swing state, so she could do worse than go for him. Another name being mentioned is Mark Kelly, the former war hero and NASA astronaut. Again, he's in a swing state. He's a senator in Nevada. So again, that might be a possible VP pick for Kamala Harris should she go forward as the presidential nominee for the Democrats. Really interesting, really looking forward to seeing these remarks, I think, from Kamala Harris this afternoon at 4:30 our time, when she's on the south lawn of the White House at a sporting event. But she is going to use that opportunity to make her remarks about what has happened over the weekend and her move forward here.
Well, Mark White, a cracking start to the show. Thank you very much. And what a ride it's going to be all the way now until November the 5th. How fitting. Thank you very much, Mark White. And I'm joined now by David Dunn, who's a professor of international politics at the University of Birmingham. Welcome to the show, Professor Dunn. Since we were speaking last week, I think we called this right. I think you said it would be unlikely that Joe Biden would survive the weekend. Reality bites. In the end, he simply ran out of road. The big question now, Kamala Harris looking like the most likely shoe-in as the candidate for the Democrat Party. Is she up to the job?
Well, there's been one of the reasons why Biden hung on so long was that there was a great deal of skepticism, even within the Democratic Party, as to whether she is the best person to replace Biden. And as you say, that we've had a lot of the big names in the Democratic Party haven't yet endorsed her. You mentioned Obama. Nancy Pelosi, who was behind the scenes getting rid of Biden, has yet to endorse Kamala Harris. And indeed, the leaders of the Democrats in the House and the Senate haven't done so either. So it's not a done deal yet, even though the momentum does seem to be with her. But as you say, the compacted process means that they may well be forced to accept her and take the risks that go with that. She is not someone who polls very high. She hasn't got a great likability rating in opinion polls, nor has she ever done so. But I imagine what their strategy is that in the future, going forward, the next 4 months, that she can use the momentum of being a new candidate to actually improve her status and go on and beat Trump in November. But it's a high stakes process to follow. It's a difficult strategy, but then the alternative of sticking with Joe Biden was problematic because he was going down in the polls, not just in the swing states, but actually in other states as well that the Democrats had hoped to win easily. So what you have is a switch from one risky strategy to another in potentially endorsing Kamala Harris.
It's interesting, you could already see the lines of attack. Donald Trump has wasted no time in putting the boot into Kamala Harris. Looks like the unity politics in America lasted precisely 1 week, Professor Dunn, and she's already putting herself forward as a former California Attorney General. Good v bad. She's made statements earlier on today. I'm expecting we'll see much more of this in over an hour's time. Kamala Harris stands up to fraudsters and criminals. Donald Trump is a convicted felon. She's also going to be attacking Donald Trump's age. Don't you think that's a bit rich? Seems like she turned a blind eye to Joe Biden's obviously decrepit age for all these past months.
Well, that's politics for you, isn't it? I mean, you go with what you can get at, and she's 59, and age was a concern across the piece. It wasn't just that Joe Biden's age was an issue. 75% of the American population, when polled, said that they liked neither of these candidates. They regarded them as too old and too much of a representation of the past. So what she's trying to do is to make that age difference an advantage for her and to portray Trump as now the old guy, having Biden dropped out, and to point to his verbal gaffes that he makes on occasion too. So she's using that as a part of her strategy. She's also using the fact that she is, as say, a distinguished lawyer and a prosecutor. So it's prosecutor versus felon is the attack line, and it's her looking for advantage wherever she can.
Yeah, they're going back down the route of white hats and black hats, good guys and bad guys. But can I talk to you a little bit about the media reaction, the supportive media in America? I think breathing a sigh of relief that Joe Biden has stepped down, calling it extraordinary, courageous, patriotic. This is what leadership looks like. But a fascinating point from the Wall Street Journal. They say the bet on Joe Biden was an epic miscalculation by the Democrats who've misled their own voters by the millions. The Democrats will pay for the big Biden lie. And what they're saying here, what they're intimating, is that there was an institutional cover-up for Joe Biden's mental wherewithal, his physical health, whatever it was. I don't suppose they'll tell us in a hurry. Do you think there's something in that? And as a consequence, Professor Dunn, they simply haven't got enough time now. It's only a matter of months away until November. That's a blink of an eyelid in politics terms.
It's a blink of an eye in politics terms in American elections that usually take 2 years. But the French managed to have an election in less than 3 weeks. It took 6 weeks of a campaign in the UK. There's no reason why it needs to be this long. And actually, given the amount of money and television attention, actually 4 months is quite a long time by any other standard for this campaign to run. The question of whether there was a cover-up or not, I mean, it's interesting. In Biden's statement, he didn't say because he was going going because he was old or because he had any illness. What he said he was going was because he didn't think he could beat Donald Trump, and other candidates could. So it was an electoral strategy rather than an admission of anything else. And of course, other commentators are saying there's a difference between being good at campaigning and being good at governing. And they're saying that actually Biden is good at making the decisions, but he's not very good on the stump. And other people point to say, well, actually, Trump is very good at campaigning, but he wasn't very good at governing. He actually achieved very little in office. He didn't build that wall. He didn't make Mexico pay for it. He didn't achieve an awful lot other than a big tax cut. So actually, there's a comparison there between what you're looking at, whether it's about the campaigning process or the governing process, and actually they require different skill sets.
Do you think we can expect to see, I'm expecting from in about an hour's time this unity politics to go out the window. I'm expecting this to be visceral. I'm expecting it to be exciting. I'm expecting this to be back to what we saw before. I'm expecting Kamala Harris to attack Donald Trump and for this to get very, very personal. It's amazing how soon that attempted assassination has gone out the window.
Yeah, of course. Trump himself didn't stick to that script very much either. His speech at the National Convention in Milwaukee, which was scripted for him, he got bored about 10 minutes into it and went back to his stump speech from his rallies. So actually, he's not really sticking to that either. And if you look at some of the tweets that he's put out and Truth Socials that he's put out, he's fairly vicious in the way in which he has gone after both Biden and Harris, even suggesting that Biden's illness of COVID is a fake to keep him off the public stage. So I think what we can expect, as you say, is a fairly brutal campaign. American politics is deeply divided, deeply polarized, and actually it's very personal. And that personal stuff comes as much from Trump as it does from Harris.
I've got to say, David Dunn, I'm hugely looking forward to it. I don't think there'll be a dull moment if you comment on politics like we do. Wow, these are the salad days. David Dunn, Professor of International Politics at the University of Birmingham. Once again, always a huge pleasure to have you on the show. Now, as you know, GB News is the People's Channel, so we wanted to know what the great British public thinks about Joe Biden's decision to quit the presidential race and what could happen next.
It's the right decision. He's been a great president, but he's too old. He's got to go. And really excited the chance. Could be first female black MP. MP, not MP, president, yeah.
Yeah, Kamala Harris. What do you think about her?
I don't know a huge amount about her, but hopefully she'll come into a bit more prominence now. She'll get a chance. And if someone's got to beat Trump. That was the problem.
So I think it's the right thing to do, personally.
Why?
Yeah. He didn't seem like he was really with it, I'll be honest. Yeah.
So he's endorsed Kamala Harris. Do you know much about her? What do you think of her?
I don't know much about Kamala Harris, to be honest. I don't really follow too much about the US election. I just see a lot of sound bites and news clips.
I think it's a shame, really. I think he's probably a force for good.
Why is he a force for good, then?
I don't know, really. I just trust him. But maybe it means the Democrats have got a better chance of getting in, which is a good thing, I suppose.
And what about Kamala Harris? He's endorsed Kamala Harris. Do you know much about her?
I don't know much about her, but it'd be good to have a female president.
Well, I've loads more on the dramatic events in the United States throughout the show, of course, and around about 4:30, we'll hear live from Kamala Harris in her first major address since this big announcement. And there's plenty of coverage on our website, gbnews.com. You've helped to make it the fastest growing national news website in the country. Now, still plenty of time to grab your chance to win £30,000 and the Great British Giveaway as our biggest cash prize of the year, and it's so tax-free. Now, what would you do with all of that extra dough? Well, here's how you could win the lot.
Don't miss your chance to win our Super Summer Giveaway. With your chance to win £30,000 cash, our biggest cash prize to date, which means you get to spend every single penny however you like. What plans would you make with an extra £30,000 cash in your bank account? Take your family on the ultimate holiday, buy that treat that's always seemed out of reach, or just put it in the bank for a later date. However you'd spend it, make sure you don't miss out. For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text cash to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
And let's cross now live to Washington, D.C., where Service Director Kimberly Cheetle is testifying at a hearing into the security lapses surrounding the assassination attempt on Donald Trump.
Increased well before the campaign and has been steadily increasing as threats evolve. The security plan included a full assessment of the Butler Farm showgrounds to identify security vulnerabilities and craft a security plan for the protectee, attendees, and the public. Immediately following the assassination attempt, I directed the activation of my crisis center. I assembled my executive team to begin surging more protective resources to the former president and to ensure the wellness of our people post-incident, all while securing an active crime scene. I immediately ordered a reevaluation of the Republican National Convention security plan, and I increased the security posture in the National Capital Region for all permanent protectees and sites. At the same time, I initiated a mission assurance investigation within our agency. I have instructed my team that all necessary resources will be dedicated to investigating these matters. We will not rest until we have explored every option, and we will leave no stone unturned. But I want to be clear, I am not waiting for these investigations to be completed prior to making changes. Over the past 2 weeks, we successfully led the planning and execution of the 75th NATO Summit and the Republican National Convention. Over the next few months, we will implement security plans for the Democratic National Convention, the United Nations General Assembly, and have already begun planning and coordinating the 2025 inauguration. It is now more important than ever for the men and women of the Secret Service to remain resilient and to focus on what is necessary to carry out our critical mission. Our agency needs to be adequately resourced in order to serve our current mission requirements and anticipate future requirements. The Secret Service currently protects 36 individuals on a daily basis, as well as world leaders who visit the United States, like Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who arrived in Washington, D.C. today. The coming years will bring an unprecedented heavy protection tempo. I have no doubt that the processes that I have implemented during my tenure as director, in addition to my nearly 30 years of experience in this agency, have positioned the Secret Service to be stronger. Our mission is not political. It is literally a matter of life and death, and the tragic events on July 13th remind us of that. I have full confidence in the men and women of the Secret Service. They are worthy of our support in executing our protective mission. I will now answer any questions that the committee may have.
Thank you very much, Director Cheetle. We'll now begin our 5 minutes questions, and I will begin. Just for the record, the Secret Service has an annual budget of around $3.1 billion, and I believe around 8,000 employees. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Obviously, there were many security failures on the day of the attempted assassination and leading up to that day. Let's start with the building that the shooter used to shoot President Trump from. At any point Saturday, did the Secret Service have an agent on top of that roof?
Sir, I'm sure, as you can imagine, that we are just 9 days out from this incident, and there's still an ongoing investigation. And so I want to make sure that any information that we are providing to you is factual.
You can't, okay. Why did the Secret Service not, can you answer why the Secret Service didn't place a single agent on the roof?
We are still looking into the advanced process and the decisions that were made.
Okay. Wasn't that building within the perimeter that should be secured? Do we agree with that?
The building was outside of the perimeter on the day of the visit. But again, that is one of the things that during the investigation we want to take a look at and determine whether or not other decisions should have been made.
One of the things that you said, I believe in an interview, that there wasn't an agent on the roof because it was a sloped roof. Is that normal, and do you fear that that immediately creates an opportunity for future would-be assassins to look for a slanted roof? I mean, this is a huge question that every American has. Why wasn't a Secret Service agent on the roof? And there have been reports that agents were supposed to be on the roof, but it was hot that day and they didn't want to be on the roof. Can you answer any of those questions, Director?
So I appreciate you asking me that question, Chairman. I should have been more clear in my answer when I spoke about where we placed personnel in that interview. What I can tell you is that there was a plan in place to provide overwatch, and we are still looking into responsibilities and who was going to provide overwatch. But the Secret Service in general, not speaking specifically to this incident, when we are providing overwatch, whether that be through counter snipers or other technology, prefer to have sterile rooftops.
Did the Secret Service use any drones for surveillance that day?
So again, I'm not going to get into specifics of that day in itself, but there are times during a security plan that the Secret Service does deploy an asset like a drone.
There were reports that the shooter used a drone just a few hours before the rally start time. Is that accurate?
I have heard those same reports, and again, am waiting for the final report.
Do you know, if you can't answer the question, that's your answer. But can you answer this? Do you know, I'm not asking yes or no, but do you know if the shooter used a drone before the shooting?
That information has been passed to us from the FBI.
How many Secret Service agents were assigned to President Trump on the day of the rally?
Again, I'm not going to get into the specifics of the numbers of personnel that we had there, but we feel that there was a sufficient number of agents assigned.
There are reports that several agents assigned to the rally on July 13th were temporary agents, agents not normally assigned to President Trump. Is that accurate?
What I can tell you is that the agents that were assigned to former President Trump are Secret Service agents that provide close protection to him, and that was what was actual on that day.
How many temporary agents were there that day?
Quite frequently, sir, during campaign events, the Secret Service utilizes agents from HSI or the Department of Homeland Security.
You don't know how many?
Supplement
you can't answer?
our plan.
Have the investigators reconstructed the shooter's precise movements over the past days, weeks, and months?
So, again,
we need to have confidence that if the FBI is leading this investigation, that they're leading a credible investigation, because there's some of us sitting up here today that don't have a lot of confidence in the FBI. So I will repeat the question. Have the investigators reconstructed the shooter's precise moments over the past days, weeks, and months?
I understand your question, Chairman, and I share your concerns about wanting to make sure that we have factual information. The FBI is conducting a criminal investigation. The Secret Service is conducting an internal investigation. There are a number of OIG investigations, and there is the external investigation that the President
Last question for me. Before July 13th, had the Trump detail requested additional resources?
What I can tell you is that for the event on July 13th, the details that were the assets that were requested for that day were given.
Okay. My time has expired. Chair now recognizes Ranking Member asking for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's been reported that before former President Trump got up on the stage at around 6 p.m. on Saturday, July 13th, that the local police had identified and even photographed a man who was acting suspiciously. And this man, who turned out to be the gunman, had been flagged as a potential threat. Is that accurate?
What I can say is that the individual was identified as suspicious.
So he was known to be suspicious before former President Trump took the stage.
That is the information I have received.
Why was he allowed to take the stage with a suspicious person having been identified in the crowd?
So I appreciate the question, and I'd like to make 2 points. If the detail had been passed information that there was a threat, the detail would never have brought the former president out onto stage. That is what we do, and that is who we are. We are charged with protecting all of our protectees.
So you distinguish between someone who is suspicious and someone who's threatening, is that right?
I do. There are a number of times at protective events where suspicious people are identified, and those individuals have to be investigated and determined what is it that identifies that person as suspicious.
So did you deny a request for additional resources that had been made by the Trump campaign?
There were no assets denied for that event in Butler on the 13th.
I see. So you're saying there were requests made for additional assistance for other specific events rather than for the campaign as a whole. Is that right?
I'm sorry, I'm not understanding.
Well, you seem to say that there were not additional resources requested for that event. And forgive me for being unfamiliar with this. Is it requested event by event, or is it requested just in general for the campaign?
So if I can explain the advance process, when an event or a venue is identified by, in this case, campaign staff, then the campaign staff works together with Secret Service agents who go out and conduct an advance. Generally, that is a 5-day time period where those discussions are had about what the perimeter is going to look like, what the size of the event is, what the venue is, and then from there, there is a request made to mitigate potential risk and threat. And I'm saying that on that day, the requests that were pushed forward were granted.
So the Secret Service did not know that the gunman actually had a weapon before President Trump was allowed to get up on the stage?
To the best of our knowledge and the facts that we have at this point, that is correct.
So can you answer this question, which I think is on the mind of most Americans thinking about this? How can a 20-year-old with his father's AR-15 assault weapon climb onto a roof with a direct 150-yard line of sight to the speaker's podium without the Secret Service or local police stopping him?
So again, sir, I will say we are 9 days out from this event, and I would like to know those answers as well, which is why we are going through these investigations to be able to determine that fully. Okay.
It's been reported that the shooter was not carrying a driver's license or any form of identification. They had no idea who he was, but then he was quickly identified, I think within 30 minutes, by using the serial number on the AR-15 under a tracing system that is now controversial. Some people say we should get rid of it. Some people want to keep it. But is that right, that the serial number was the key information which led to the identification of the shooter?
That is my understanding, sir, yes.
Okay. If an American citizen were just to stop you and say, Director Cheadle, we support your work to the tune of billions of dollars and thousands of employees, what went wrong? What would you say?
Again, knowing that we're 9 days out, I would say, as I have said from the very outset, I accept responsibility for this tragedy. We are going to look into how this happened, and we are going to take corrective action to ensure that it never happens again.
Well, I appreciate that, and I hope you will act with vigor and focus and intensity, and it seems you understand the gravity and solemnity of this to the American people. Millions and millions of Americans don't feel safe with all the AR-15s out there. We thought at least the President of the United States or a former President of the United States would be safe, but now that's not even clear. Mr. Chairman, I yield back to you.
Gentleman yields back. Chair now recognizes Chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, Mr. Jordan from Ohio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director, were you guessing or lying? The day after President Trump is shot, Secret Service spokesman Anthony Guglielmi said, quote, the assertion that a member of the former president's security team requested additional security resources that the U.S. Secret Service or the Department of Homeland Security rebuffed is absolutely false. The next day, Secretary Mayorkas said that is an unequivocally false assertion. We had not received any request for additional security measures that were rebuffed. But 5 days later, the Washington Post said this. Top officials repeatedly rejected requests from Donald Trump's security detail for more personnel. The next day, the New York Times said this. Mr. Guglielmi acknowledged that the Secret Service had turned down some requests for additional federal security assets for Mr. Trump's detail. So which is it? Because both statements can't be true. Were you guessing or lying when you said you didn't turn down requests from President Trump's detail?
Neither, sir, and I appreciate the question.
Well, what were you doing? Because those statements don't jive.
So what I can tell you is that for the event in Butler, there were no requests that were denied. As far as requests...
Well, maybe they got tired of asking. Maybe you turned them down so darn much, they said, not worth asking. How many times did you turn them down ahead of that?
I think that it is important to distinguish between what some people may view as a denial of an asset or a request.
Well, is Mr. Guglielmi your spokesperson? He said he acknowledged the Secret Service had turned down some requests. I'm asking how many?
A denial of a request does not equal a vulnerability.
Well, tell me what it is.
There are a number of ways that threats and risks can be mitigated with a number of different assets, whether that be through personnel, whether that be through technology, or other resources.
Well, tell the committee which it was. They asked for additional help in some form or another. You told them no. How many times did you tell them no, and what did you tell them no to?
Again, I cannot speak to specific incidents, but I can tell you in general terms, the Secret Service is judicious with their resources based on...
What does some requests mean? How many times? Some indicate requests is plural. So more than once they asked for additional help and you turned them down. What did they ask for and how many times did you turn them down? Pretty basic questions.
So again, without having all of the details in front of me, sir, what I can tell you is that there are times...
You didn't get briefed on how many times you turned down the Trump detail when they asked for additional help?
I'm sorry.
You didn't get briefed on that before you came to this hearing, knowing you were going to get asked that question?
What I can tell you is that in generic terms, when details make a request, there are times that there are alternate ways to cover off on that threat or that risk.
But that's not what he said. He said they were denied certain requests, some requests. This is your spokesperson, not me talking. This is the Secret Service talking. And what a change from absolutely false, unequivocally false to, oh, by the way, there were some times where we didn't give them what they wanted. That's a huge change in 5 days. And the fact that you can't answer how many times you did that, that's pretty darn frustrating, not just for me, but for the country.
I hear your frustration.
Let me ask you this. Were any of those requests denied to President Trump's detail after you knew about the Iranian threat?
What I can tell you, again, I don't know the specifics, is that there are times when we can fill a request. It doesn't necessarily have to be with a Secret Service asset or resource. We can fill that request with locally available assets.
You spoke to anyone at the White House since July 13th?
Yes, I have.
Who'd you talk to?
I have briefed the President and the Vice President.
Talked to the First Lady?
No, I have not.
Talked to the White House staff? Anyone in the White House communications?
No, I have not.
Have you talked to the counter sniper who took the shot that took out the bad guy?
Yes, I have.
And can you tell us about that conversation?
I would not want to reveal conversations that I've had with my employees.
But that's exactly the kind of information the American people want to know. American people who pay your salary.
I understand. This is an ongoing investigation, and
Who's all doing the investigating at Secret Service? I know the Inspector General, but is there also an internal investigation in addition to the Inspector General?
We are conducting a mission assurance investigation internally, yes.
You know what it looks like, Director? It looks like you won't answer some pretty basic questions. It looks like you got a 9% raise and you cut corners when it came to protecting one of the most important individuals, most well-known individuals on the planet. A former president, likely the guy who's going to be the next president. It looks like you guys were cutting corners. That's what it looks like to me. Is that true?
I am here today because I want to answer questions, but I also want to be cautious.
You might want to, but you haven't answered. I don't think you've answered one question from the chairman, the ranking member, or me. Well, we got a lot of other people asking. We'll see if your record improves. But right now, you haven't answered, I don't think, any questions. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair now recognizes Ms. Norton from Washington, D.C.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the summer of 1963, as a law student, I traveled to the South to work in the civil rights movement. When I arrived in Jackson, Mississippi, I was met by a civil rights activist who showed me around town and tried to convince me to work in Jackson that summer. I recall talking with him and his wife about the raw atmosphere in Jackson. Later that day, he took me to the bus station for my trip to my assignment. That night, he was assassinated outside his home. His name was Medgar Evers. I condemn the political violence. It is a threat to democracy. I want to discuss one of the roots of political violence, guns. For years, Republicans, including a member of this committee, have introduced legislation and amendments to repeal or block the District of Columbia gun violence protection laws, including its bans on assault weapons and large capacity magazines. The shooter at the Trump rally used the mass shooter's gun of choice, an assault weapon, specifically an AR-15 style rifle, and presumably a large capacity magazine, which is defined in D.C. as a magazine that can hold more than 10 bullets. Under current D.C. law, D.C. does not recognize concealed carry permits issued by other jurisdictions, but it does issue concealed carry permits to both residents and non-residents. However, D.C. imposes a number of requirements on concealed carry applicants, including suitability, such as not having exhibited a propensity for violence or instability. Moreover, D.C. residents restricts where the guns can be carried, such as a political demonstration near the White House and Naval Observatory or near people under Secret Service protection, provided the permit holder has been given notice. This week, the House is expected to consider the fiscal year 2025 Financial Services and General Government Appropriations Bill. This Republican-drafted bill would allow an individual with a permit to carry a concealed handgun issued by a state or territory to carry a concealed handgun in D.C., regardless of that jurisdiction's permit requirements. A Republican has filed an amendment to that provision to allow such an individual to carry a magazine of any size with that handgun. In short, the pending bill and amendment would allow any person with a carry permit issued by another jurisdiction to carry a concealed handgun with a magazine of any size in any location in the District of Columbia. The Secret Service is responsible for protecting a large number of people and facilities in D.C. Director Cheadle, would Secret Service protectees in D.C. be safer or less safe if people who have exhibited a propensity for violence or instability could carry a concealed handguns in D.C.?
I think being a Secret Service agent and an officer or a law enforcement officer in any state is difficult. They are required to make decisions and snap judgments in the blink of an eye. And I think that the officers and the agents that work here in the D.C. area do a great job of monitoring the public and reacting to threats as appropriate when they arise.
Would Secret Service protectees in D.C. be safer or less safe if people in D.C. could carry concealed handguns with large capacity magazines?
I think, ma'am, that we work in parameters where we travel around North America, and the rules on open carry and concealed carry are different from state to state, and that is part of what the Secret Service takes into account when we develop a security plan. Obviously, anyone that comes into one of our protective sites, we would establish magnetometer support, metal detectors that personnel would have to process through, eliminating that potential.
Would Secret Service protectees in D.C. be safer or less safe if more people could carry handguns in D.C.?
I think, again, as I stated, ma'am, we want to make sure that we provide a safe environment for all of our protectees, and whatever measures we would need to put in place for a secure site, we would do so.
I yield back.
Gentlelady's time's expired. Chair now recognizes the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, Mr. Turner from Ohio.
Director Cheadle, your opening statement indicates that the Secret Service constructed a security plan for the site in Pennsylvania. I'm assuming that security plan would also include the security footprint for the site, but it also would be based upon a threat assessment for the risk threats associated with Donald Trump and the crowd in attendance. Would it not include a threat assessment?
Yes, it would.
So that threat assessment, as we know, basically would have started with, there's a generalized threat against Donald Trump because he is a presidential candidate. Then it would have gone to he's a former president, and he gets security coverage just as Bush, Clinton, Carter, and Obama do. And then you also have the heightened political environment. Even for those, it's clear that the security footprint, that the threat assessment was insufficient, which permitted then a 20-year-old to actually enter with a weapon and shoot Donald Trump. But I want to ask you about two other aspects of the threat assessment. It is known and public that Iran is a threat risk for Donald Trump. They're a threat risk for John Bolton, former Secretary of State Pompeo, and Donald Trump, because they have indicated they want to assassinate them as a result of retaliation for the killing of Soleimani. That is both, for Iran, a generalized threat. They're targeting these individuals, but also, most recently, a specific threat to Donald Trump himself. Now, I want to enter into the record by UC a Department of Justice Public Affairs release, a CNN article, an article from Fox News, and an article from CBS, all of which acknowledge,
without objection to order,
that this threat exists for Donald Trump from Iran, and that there are specific threats, most recently, that have been acknowledged. Director Cheadle, have you read the intelligence of the generalized threat to Donald Trump by Iran as a result of their desire to retaliate for the killing of Soleimani?
I have.
Have you read or been briefed about the intelligence of the specific recent threat to Donald Trump from Iran?
Yes, I have.
Director Wray, when we were getting our briefing, indicated that he thought the threat assessment should have included this threat from Iran. Is it your testimony today that the threat assessment, since you've read this intelligence, was sufficient to protect him from this threat from Iran?
My testimony today is that the information that we had at the time was known.
Was it sufficient? Director Cheadle, was it sufficient for the Iranian threat that you said you have read the intelligence briefings for?
That information was passed to...
Well, I'm not asking the bureaucratic issue of who did it get passed around to. Director Cheadle, was it sufficient for the specific and generalized threat to Donald Trump's life from Iran?
Yes, I do believe it was.
Director Cheadle, is an Iranian assassin more capable than a 20-year-old?
Sir, I think we've acknowledged that there was gaps and a failure that day.
When I raised this issue with Director Wray, he was incensed. He was shocked that the threat assessment of Iran did not seem to be, as we and I discussed, baked in to your security footprint and your threat assessment. And he went on to say that the generalized threat that he has told the whole country that we are under from a potential terrorist threat. He has said we're under the highest threat level since 9/11, that the lights are flashing red. And he has specifically indicated that people have crossed the southern border as a result of the Biden administration's policy, and that there are in our country today terrorists and individuals who are affiliated with terrorist groups and organizations. That would be a heightened threat environment, Director Cheadle, would it not?
Yes.
In his public statements, he has said he is making these statements because he wants people to take them into consideration in threat assessments, specifically. Now, that would be a threat not just to Donald Trump, but it would also be a threat to the crowd there, wouldn't it?
Yes.
Are ISIS terrorists and al-Qaeda terrorists and international groups and terrorists more capable than a 20-year-old in pulling off either a mass shooting or an assassination of Donald Trump?
Sir, again, there was clearly a breakdown and a failure that day.
Have you read the intelligence of the terrorists that are currently in the United States that Director Wray speaks, and those individuals that are here that are affiliated with terrorist groups and organizations that are in the process, as Director Wray said, of representing a significant threat of a terrorist attack occurring in the United States?
I have read reports that apply specifically to the Secret Service's mission.
Director Cheadle, because Donald Trump is alive, and thank God he is, you look incompetent. If Donald Trump had been killed, you would have looked culpable. There is no aspect of this that indicates that there has been any protection to Donald Trump. The threat was identified before he took the stage, and the shooter was only killed after Donald Trump himself was killed. Not only should you resign, if you refuse to do so, President Biden needs to fire you, because his life, Donald Trump's life, and all the other people which you protect are at risk because you have no concept of the aspect that the security footprint needs to be correlated to the threat. I yield back.
Chair now recognizes Mr. Lynch from Massachusetts.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Cheadle, there were multiple security failures at the former president's rally in Butler, Pennsylvania. First of all, there was a failure to isolate the podium from exposure to direct fire. Do we know who made that decision to allow that rooftop to remain as an unprotected area? Do we know who came up with that security plan that omitted that?
Sir, I don't have a specific person to identify for you.
Okay, well, that's what I'm looking for, so let's move on. There's also a breakdown in security in failure to confront the shooter over an hour before the former president began his remarks, when the shooter was identified as a person of interest. What particularly allowed agents or law enforcement to identify him as a person of interest?
So I appreciate the question, and again, I will say that we are 9 days out, and there are a multitude of interviews that are still taking place.
Okay, so did he have a rangefinder? There were some reports that the individual had a rangefinder. That would certainly raise my suspicion. Did he have a rangefinder?
Yes, he did, but may I explain that at a number of our sites, especially when you're at outdoor venues, a rangefinder is not a prohibited item. It is sometimes an item that is brought in by individuals if you're going to be in the back.
Did anybody confront him on that? Anybody ask him questions? What are you doing with the rangefinder? Anybody confront him on his presence where he was in proximity to the president?
So again, to my knowledge, I believe that was the process that was taking place, was to locate the individual.
Did they confront him? Did they go up to him? Did they talk to him?
I do not have those details at this time.
Those are important details. There was also a failure to communicate between law enforcement to act quickly upon information provided by either local law enforcement or rally attendees that the suspect was positioned on the roof. There were minutes of delay before any meaningful action was taken, even though he was several hundred feet from the podium, and this was obviously minutes before the shooting. Let me ask you, there was considerable delay in removing the president from the podium after the shooting began. He got shot in the air. It was still over a minute before he was removed from the stage. Meanwhile, this shooter had multiple clips, several clips. He got off 8 shots, and he had the capacity and the ability, if he was not neutralized, to basically mow down that whole Secret Service detachment as well as the president. What, from your own investigation, caused that delay under the circumstances?
What I can tell you is that when the agents identified that the shooting was taking place, in under 3 seconds, they threw themselves on top of the president.
I understand that. There was heroism there. No question about it. No question about it. But protocol would indicate, and these are the opinions of various former Secret Service agents, people who have done this work in the past, that over a minute of exposure on that podium with a shooter with a high-capacity weapon who had already wounded the president and could have got off, we don't know how many more rounds, and yet the president remained exposed, even though he was joined in that exposure by the Secret Service in their heroic acts. It just, I don't know if there's a good explanation for that.
Our personnel created a body bunker on top of the president,
I get that.
shielding him.
Yeah, this was an AR-15 style weapon that would have made pretty quick work if he was determined and able to do so. This is not the first investigation that we've had of the Secret Service during my time here on this committee, and the last one we had, our previous investigation determined that the Secret Service was experiencing a staffing crisis that poses perhaps the greatest threat to the agency, and that's a quote. Is that staffing crisis still in place? Is that still something that you deal with on a daily basis?
As of today, the Secret Service has just over 8,000 employees. We continue to hire, knowing that we need to ensure that we keep pace with
what would be the full complement of...
And gentlemen, time's expired, but please answer the question.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
What would be the full complement that you're looking for? You've got 8,000, and how many would be a full complement for the service?
So we are still striving towards a number of 9,500 employees approximately in order to be able to meet future and emerging needs.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your courtesy. I yield back.
Chair recognizes Dr. Fox from North Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Cheadle, what grade would you give the Secret Service's performance in Butler, Pennsylvania on July 13?
As I've stated, ma'am, this was clearly a failure. I would grade the agents and officers who selflessly threw themselves in front of the president and neutralized the threat an A. I think that we need to examine the events that led up to and prior to that day.
You stated in 2021 that the Secret Service has a zero-fail mission. It's clear that the events of July 13 show a cascade of failures that cost Corey Comparator his life, nearly cost former president his life, and injured David Dutch and James Copenhaver. When an agency fails spectacularly at its mission, those responsible must be held accountable, and the problems must be fixed so they cannot happen again. Why should the American people or the officials you're responsible for protecting have confidence in your ability to lead the Secret Service after such a spectacular failure?
I appreciate the question, and I am committed to finding answers so that we can make the agency stronger after this.
You said on July 15 that the buck stops with me. How are you taking accountability for the Secret Service's failures during the July 13 assassination attempt on President Trump?
I have taken accountability, and I will continue to take accountability. I am responsible for leading the agency, and I am responsible for finding the answers to how this event occurred and making sure that it doesn't happen again.
So I would like to explore how you got the job as director of the United States Secret Service. Is it typical for the director of the Secret Service to be recommended for the role at the behest of a president's family and senior staff, perhaps at the request of Joe Biden or Anthony Bernal?
I got the job as a director of the Secret Service because I spent 27 years in an agency with a mission that I absolutely love. I started my career in Detroit. I worked my way up through investigations and protection.
Was there competition for the position?
You would have to ask those who were involved in the interview process.
But you think you are the best person in the country to head the Secret Service?
I think that I am the best person to lead the Secret Service at this time.
The Secret Service receives billions in funding each year, as has been explained by my colleagues here. In fact, you've had an increase in real terms of 55%. As you're no doubt aware, staffing levels for those assigned to protect the president, former presidents, and other senior officials has decreased by about 350 between 2014 and today. Clearly, a lack of financial resources not to blame for the staffing shortage. In 2022, the Secret Service saw nearly half its workforce leave in 1 year, and during the same year, it was ranked dead last among law enforcement agencies in the best places to work in the federal government. Can you explain why your agency was so poorly rated and why so many staff left in just 1 year?
So with all due respect, I dispute the statistic of half of the employees leaving in 2022. I think that that has been inaccurate data that's been reported out there. But what I can tell you is, as I have returned as the director of the agency, we have had an increase in hiring and staffing and an increase in resources. And we are committed to continue to hire so that we can be staffed appropriately to meet the dynamic mission that we have.
Well, you may want to dispute it, but it's out there. My understanding, given the high-profile failures and rotten culture at the Secret Service during your nearly two-year tenure, why should the American people have any confidence in your ability to lead the Secret Service to perform its zero-fail mission to protect our senior leaders?
The Secret Service has an incredible culture. Our men and women place service over self. They come in every day willing to risk their lives for our protective mission, and they work investigations that thwart people who would do harm to children, child exploiters. We have an incredible mission, and our culture is we will get the job done no matter what.
Well, those on the front line certainly have a great culture, and they were willing to risk their lives for President Trump. But I'm not sure the leadership at the agency has this right kind of culture. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Chair now recognizes Mr. Conley from Virginia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I hope the American people do appreciate the incredible daily risks Secret Service agents take on our behalf. You mentioned there are 36 regular clients you've got that you protect constantly, but I was participating in the NATO summit just 2 weeks ago. We had 32 heads of government and heads of state, plus visiting heads of state and heads of government. Presumably, you provided protection for all of them.
That is correct.
Just saying. Help us understand, however, I will stipulate that there's an ongoing investigation. You don't want to go into too much detail on that until you've been able to ascertain all the facts and analyze what they mean. You can understand, however, the anxiety we and the American public have about how could this happen and how can we ensure it can't recur. Now, there are some things my friends on one particular side of the aisle don't really want to talk about, like AR-15s and access to them by a 20-year-old, or anybody for that matter. Presumably, Director Cheadle, the ubiquity of weapons, guns in America, especially assault weapons or semi-automatic weapons, that's helped your job and the mission of your agencies, right? It's made it less complicated. Isn't that true?
I'm sorry, I'm not understanding your question.
Real simple. More guns, especially dangerous ones, have made your job protecting people easier. Is that not right?
I think from every
Director Cheadle, this is simple English. More guns, do they make your job more complicated or less complicated in protecting these 36 clients and visiting heads of state and heads of government that come to Washington?
I think the Secret Service needs to take into account.
I didn't ask that.
They're
I'm sorry. I asked a simple question, which deserves a simple answer. The ubiquity of guns, dangerous weapons in America, like AR-15s, has that made your job, that is to say the mission of the Secret Service, easier or more difficult?
I think the threat environment for protecting our Secret Service protectees is always difficult, and that's dynamic, and it's always evolving.
We stipulate it's always difficult. Again, this is a simple one. Does the ubiquity of guns make your job easier or more difficult today?
I understand the Second Amendment rights of individuals.
I didn't ask that question. I'm not questioning the Second Amendment. I'm asking a simple analysis, Director Cheadle. And I can tell you, you're not making my job easier in terms of assessing your qualification for continuing on as director. Please answer the question. You're the head of the Secret Service. You're speaking on behalf of 8,000 members who put their lives on the line. We just had a failure by your own admission. Do guns make your job easier or harder?
I think the job of the Secret Service is difficult on every day, and we need to make sure that we are mitigating all threats, whether that be weapons,
isn't my question.
personnel.
That is not my question. And now I think you're evading the answer, which is not a hard one.
I am sorry that you feel that way, sir.
How else could I feel, Director Cheadle, when you're clearly avoiding a direct answer to a very simple declarative question? We almost lost a presidential candidate the other day. A 20-year-old had access to his father's AR-15 and got on top of a roof within 500 yards or feet of the podium. And I'm asking you, did the availability of that AR-15, which is replicated all across America make your job harder or easier, and you're not willing to answer that question? And you think, and you wonder why we might have a lack of confidence in your continued ability to direct this agency?
I understand your question, and that's the environment.
Well, if you understand my question, why not answer it?
Because it's the environment that the Secret Service works in every day.
That doesn't tell me anything. That's the environment we work in. I had an attack on my office a year ago. I know a little bit about violence too. He came to kill me. When he couldn't, he beat one of my staffers 8 times with a baseball bat on the head. We live with the threat of violence. But a simple answer from the director of the Secret Service would be helpful. And I'm sorry you've chosen to evade it. I yield back.
Chair, now recognize Mr. Grofman from Wisconsin.
Wow, an absolutely astonishing cross-examination for this past 35 minutes or so of Kimberly Cheatle, the director of the US Secret Service, about those events that had attempted assassination of Donald Trump in Pennsylvania on July the 13th. Absolutely incredible. The standout line to me was, because Donald Trump is alive, you look incompetent. If he died, you'd be culpable. Joe Biden needs to fire you. So much to talk about there, and let's do that now with our reporter, Mark White. Mark, that was brutal. That was forensic. It was merciless. So many questions were asked, and it didn't feel, Mark, as though very many answers were given. Give us some details.
Was being evasive in the answers that she was giving, that she was resorting to the classic, because there's an investigation ongoing, we can't really go into the detail of that. And that clearly was frustrating very deeply those lawmakers who were eviscerating the head of the Secret Service there in the questioning, question after question. As you said, that key point that she's culpable because Donald Trump survived, but would have been culpable if he had died. Other issues raised about if you cannot protect fully a VIP like the former president from a 20-year-old, then how on earth are you going to be able to fully protect all of these important figures from threats such as ISIS, threats such as Iran, following intelligence that there was a plot that was being hatched by the government in Tehran to go after leading politicians in the US. Some real concern, and of course the Secret Service was more than aware of that. The lawmakers talking about the evidence that those security risks, terrorists, had come over the southern border into the United States, and some real concern that they have that going forward, the Secret Service is just not going to be in a position to deal with these threats if it can't deal with the threat posed by a 20-year-old with an AR-15. And then, of course, the frustration, Martin, was all of the pertinent questions about what happened that day in terms of the advanced preparedness that the Secret Service should have done, the scoping out of the area, the deployment of assets to various locations, such as the rooftop where the young man had been. She wouldn't answer a question such as whether the Secret Service at any point had put one of their own assets up on that roof, even to look at it. So a real feeling that she's just not answering the questions and using the excuse of the ongoing investigations in order to do that. That's what's, I think, bringing out real anger amongst the Republican lawmakers in particular.
Mark, there was one question and answer in particular which absolutely just took my breath away. I couldn't believe it. The question was, why was the president allowed to take the stage when you knew a suspicious man was on the roof? And her answer was, we didn't know he was dangerous. There was an audible gasp in that hearing when that came out. Mark, That's an astonishing thing for anybody to say, but the person in charge of the directions, the person in charge of national security, saying, well, we just took the chance. It's an incredible thing to admit, Mark White.
I think in the fullness of time, we will get to find out whether that suspicious person report or reports that came from members of the public that then were assessed by the police, identified a person who was described as being suspicious, actually fell into the category of someone suspicious also posing a threat. The thing to add about the Secret Service and these events that they try to protect individuals at, particularly outside, is that there are often thousands of individuals. And there will, from time to time, be people in the crowd, people that the attention of the security services at that venue are drawn to as initially being suspicious. They're quickly checked out and they're deemed not to be a threat. So there is big questions to be asked, obviously, about in knowing there was a suspicious person, in that suspicious person being confirmed by the police, what was done in a prompt manner to assess whether that suspicious person then posed a threat. And knowing that there was a suspicious person that was clearly giving some alarm to the authorities and members of the public who were alerting the authorities to that suspicious person, should President Trump have ever been brought onto the stage until they were clear in their own minds that they had found, identified, and then ruled out that person as being a threat. These are the big questions that need to be answered, the questions that she has gone nowhere near in answering today.
Mark White, it was absolutely staggering. It was truly astonishing, that evisceration. Thank you very much for joining us on the show, Mark White. And let's continue this conversation now with US political journalist Laurie Laird. Laurie, welcome to the show. Did you watch that cross-examination there? Did you see what just happened? Sorry to use the pun, but it felt like a career assassination. There's so many questions were asked. She simply refused or wasn't able to give questions. In fact, one of the cross-examiners basically said, she said, I'm here today because I want to answer questions. And he said, I don't think you've answered a single question here today. Laurie Laird, astonishing scenes. What was your take on it?
Absolutely astonishing. And I do believe, Martin, that she didn't answer the questions because she may not have had the answers. Look, I think something that we can all agree on, no matter where you are on the political spectrum, is this was a spectacular fail. Absolutely spectacular fail. I mean, one of the things that struck me is this should be a forum to try and get some answers. And to me, it felt like a little bit of sport. The Republicans are angry. Democrats are angry. Everyone should be angry because of this fail. But it did feel a little bit personal to me rather than trying to get to the bottom of what happened. So many things went wrong. And it did feel like a bit of a character assassination, you know, for one of the Republicans to say, you should be fired. Well, that's a statement of the bleeding obvious. The woman should be fired. She has not led well. And it feels a little bit to me like a bit of sport. It actually made me miss select committees in the UK where there actually is some exchange of views and you get something out of it. That said, Kimberly Cheadle's responses, you know, where she did give a response, were outrageous. She gave herself an A-. For that, for her performance that day. She said she thinks she's the best person to be leading the Secret Service. That is, you know, obviously laughable. But we do need answers here, and I'm not sure we're going to get them in this forum.
Laurie, she started the session by saying on July the 13th, we failed. She then went on towards the end of the session, which is still ongoing. I have taken accountability since the beginning and will continue to do so. Do you think inevitably, Laurie Laird, inexorably, this will have to end in her resignation?
Oh, God, it has to. And it really should end in a sacking. You know, there is such a series of things that went horribly wrong. She has not discharged her duties. And while she said she wanted to take responsibility and there were fails, she gave herself an A-, which is, you know, absolutely absurd. But she does have to go. But before that, or even during that process, we need to know exactly what happened. And I think one of the things that needs to be looked at is, are there enough people? Because there are so many people that now qualify for Secret Service protection. You know, do we need to fund more bodies? We need to look at what happens with, you know, one of the questions that was being asked as just before you and I came on is the challenges that are presented by the fact that almost, you know, everyone in America has a gun. So how do you police that? Does this mean outdoor rallies perhaps are not feasible at this time? That needs to be looked at. So many questions, and it would be nice to get to the bottom of this rather than to have the personal, and that's what this hearing feels like.
Laurie Laird, meanwhile, in around about 10 minutes' time, Kamala Harris is due to address the nation for the first time since she looks like being the favourite as the nominee for the Democrat Party. Looking ahead to that, what kind of exchange do you think we'll get? She's come out fighting, calling Donald Trump a felon, calling him too old. It looks like that unity politics message lasted about a week.
Yeah, well, and look, the last time you and I spoke, we didn't give it a week, so it's outlasted our predictions. But my God, with this hearing on Capitol Hill, with Kamala Harris coming out for the first time as the presumptive nominee, you can't get a sandwich, Martin. The things are moving so very quickly in the U.S. But this will be a very interesting outing for Kamala Harris because typically this has not been her strong suit. She does not do well campaigning. She does not do well on the stump. Witness her very, very poor presidential campaign. She didn't even make it to the primaries. In fact, I think a lot of people forget that she actually did try to run for president in 2019. Didn't even get to 2020 for that. Her ratings never went above sort of 3-4% popularity ratings. So we will be watching very, very closely to see how she does. Her poll ratings have gone up a little bit over the past month or so, maybe just because she's become more visible. We didn't see her for 3 years, but she will have to nail this, and she's going to have to nail every public appearance that goes beyond this. Historically, again, we haven't seen that much of her. She's tended to do a lot better, in my opinion, in sit-down things, one-on-one interviews. She comes across as much more approachable, accessible in those. On the stump, she's wooden. She looks uncomfortable. So we'll see how that goes. I'm glad you brought up that she's come out fighting, calling Donald Trump a felon. These are the two things that the Democrats are really pushing hard on. One is Donald Trump's character. That really hasn't landed very well. The other is reproductive rights, and that's one that Kamala Harris has handled well in that voters like her the way she is talking about that. Most voters are pro-abortion, about 2/3 of the country. She's really hammering that home. And these are the two real strong points that she feels she has. Let's see how she goes with this. But trying to go personally after Donald Trump hasn't worked over the past 8 years. Not clear to me why it would work now.
OK, all eyes on America in about 10 minutes' time. Laurie Laird, we could talk all night, but we've simply ran out of time. Thanks for joining us, as ever.
See you soon.
Now, lots more on the incredible events in the United States throughout the show. And remember, at 4:30, we'll hear live from Vice President Kamala Harris. And there's plenty of coverage on our website, GBNews.com. You've helped to make it the fastest-growing national news website in the country. Now, a change of pace because there's still plenty of time to grab your chance to win £30,000 and the Great British Giveaway. It's our biggest cash prize of the year and it's tax-free. Now, what would you do with all the extra cash? Well, here's how you could win it all.
£30,000 in cash has to be won. It's our biggest cash prize so far and it could be yours. Charles was a winner. Listen to what he says about winning the Great British Giveaway.
I'm Charles. I'm on £18,000 cash. It was just amazing, and as soon as it goes into your bank account, it just changed. It's a life-changing thing.
The next big winner could be you, with an extra £30,000 cash in your bank. For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text cash to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Now, was the European Union to blame for last week's massive tech global outage? Well, that's what Microsoft is saying was the blackout, courtesy of Brussels. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
No, it wasn't just us who celebrated the big football match on Saturday. Prince William was in the crowd in Dusseldorf and couldn't help but show his relief when England scored.
And over the weekend, it was also announced that the Prince of Wales is set to star in a new two-part documentary on ITV covering his mission to try and eradicate homelessness.
Well, let's talk about this and much, much more with Angela Levin, royal biographer, who joins us in the studio. I'm glad to hear that this documentary's been made, Angela, because I worried that he made this big announcement about homelessness and I thought, goodness me, here is somebody who could maybe do something about this. And then it's all seemed to have gone quiet.
He's been very busy with it, actually. He's gone all over the country to see different areas and how they have been, and to try and change people's attitude to homelessness, that they're people who need help and want to get back into a normal life. I think it was 2009, he slept out in the street to see for himself what it was like. And he also helps people who are selling the magazines, the big issue. So I think he was actually just covering the basic about what it was like for him and how he can now help other people. He and Catherine are putting £3 million straight away into that, and it's going to
Where
be...
does that money come from?
Their own foundation, you know.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so they're not taking it from our tax or anybody else's. He wants to do this so badly because of his mother. You know, she took them to see people who were homeless, and even if he can't do everyone, he can help people be kind and understanding.
GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Welcome back. It's 4:27. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, here's a big question for you. Was the European Union to blame for last week's devastating global tech outage? Well, that's what Microsoft is claiming at any rate. The company claims a 2009 agreement with the European Commission restricted it from implementing security changes that could have prevented the incident, which led, of course, to widespread disruptions in travel and healthcare around the world. Well, joining me now to discuss this is the privacy and security expert, Jamal Ahmed. Jamal, so Microsoft pointing the finger firmly at Brussels. What's your take?
It's really interesting that Microsoft are blaming EU for this. Essentially, what happened was, many years ago, Microsoft was about to get investigated for anti-competition. And they did a deal with the EU saying that they would allow other developers API access to the kernel level, which means that anyone has the same level of access to Microsoft as Microsoft does itself. And what Microsoft's argument here is because the EU had forced us, or because we agreed with the EU that we would allow other developers to access at the kernel level, we couldn't block this from being rolled out, and that's what has affected those 8.5 million Microsoft computers worldwide. Now, the reason Microsoft are unhappy about this is because when they look at Google and when they look at Apple, they haven't been forced, or they haven't agreed to give such access to anyone else. And so Microsoft are unhappy about that. And they're saying, if we had not had to sign this agreement to give this level of access to people, this would never have been rolled out. And this global outage, the biggest global outage that we've seen in the world's history, would never have taken place.
And Jamal, that begs the question. I mean, it had all the hallmarks of a cyber attack that Vladimir Putin would have been proud of. And isn't the point this? Bureaucrats in Brussels shouldn't be telling expert companies with so much at stake what to do. Apple said no to Brussels. As you said, Google said no to Brussels, and they said no precisely because they claimed, correctly as it looks like, that giving third parties access to that depth, that real nucleus of the code, can cause disasters just like this. That would say to me, QED, Brussels meddling was counterproductive.
There's a couple of ways of looking at this. So number one is it was actually Microsoft that agreed to this to begin with, to stop that. Whereas companies like Apple have said, no, what we're actually going to do is we're going to focus on the security ourselves because we don't want to give anyone else access to this kernel layer. And then on the other hand, you've got Vladimir Putin, who I'm sure is having a right laugh because this is not a cyber attack. In fact, CrowdStrike, the company behind this push and update, are there to help businesses to keep the attackers, the bad guys, Putin, Russian's army, doing these cyber attacks out. And so they rolled this update out and it had a flaw in the update. And because of that, all of the screens went blue, which means people couldn't see and people couldn't access anything on those screens. They couldn't access patient records, they couldn't access flight information. And that's why we had such a big outage. Now, it is not really fair to say Brussels is responsible for that. Yes, the agreement has allowed for this to happen, but Microsoft needs to take some responsibility and say, instead of agreeing to that, what could they have done instead? And now that we know this has happened, how do we stop this from happening in future?
Well, maybe we could start, Jamal Ahmed, with stopping bureaucrats poking their noses into areas of expertise where the experts are best serving our interests. Superb. Thank you, Jamal Ahmed. Thank you for joining us on the show. Now, there's lots more still to come between now and 5 o'clock. We're due to hear live from US Vice President Kamala Harris any moment now. What will she have to say about Joe Biden quitting the presidential race? And will she blast out at Donald Trump? But first, here's your latest news headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
The top stories this hour. The Secret Service chief in the United States has told US Congress that the attempt to kill Donald Trump was the most significant operational failure for decades. Kimberly Cheadle has been testifying before this US Congress in the United States. Of course, if you're watching on television, you can see our live pictures coming to us from Congress now, all about the attempted assassination of Donald Trump last week. She has been questioned about security lapses that allowed the attempted assassination of the former president, saying she took full responsibility. Meanwhile, donations to the US Democratic Party have surged after President Joe Biden announced he's standing down from the US presidential race. The 81-year-old has endorsed Kamala Harris as Democrat candidate. It comes after he faced increasing calls to step aside since a faltering debate performance against Republican Donald Trump last month. And the news comes just 4 months before Americans go to the polls, throwing the race for the White House into uncertainty. And an 11-year-old girl has been orphaned following a crash which killed 4 members of her family, as well as 2 motorcyclists in West Yorkshire. Shane Roller and his partner, Shannon Morgan, and their daughters, Lily and Ruby, died on the A61 when their car was in a collision with a motorbike. A GoFundMe page has been set up for the little girl who was not in the car, and that has already reached more than £30,000. The scene of the crash is still closed off. Superintendent Alan Travis from West Yorkshire Police said it's an absolutely tragic accident which has resulted in the loss of 6 lives. And the Prime Minister's set to cut plans for reliance on foreign workers by improving skills training in England. Skills England was a manifesto pledge from Labour and is designed to fix the fragmented and broken training system, says Labour. In a speech today, Sir Keir argued that a new approach is needed to reduce the need for immigration in key sectors. The Conservatives have warned, though, those plans could actually cut the number of apprenticeships on offer. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Polly Middlehurst. I'm back in half an hour. See you then.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Polly. Now, remember, shortly we're going to hear live from the US Vice President Kamala Harris on GB News. Stay tuned. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel.
Hello again. I'm here with your latest GB News weather update, coming to you from the Met Office. Looking ahead through much of this week, it is going to be quite changeable. So some wet weather at times, but also something a bit drier to come too. In fact, as we go through the end of today, it's going to turn a little bit drier for many of us because the system that has brought the earlier cloud and rain is clearing away. That being said, still quite a few showers across parts of Scotland as we go through the end of the afternoon and into the evening. Some heavy, possibly even thundery, but most of these will start to ease and clear away overnight, and then some pulses of rain pushing into parts of southwest England and Wales, but otherwise some dry and at times clear weather to come. But despite the clear skies, temperatures not dropping a huge amount. Another warm night for many of us. Watch out for some heavy pulses of rain first thing tomorrow morning, initially across central southern parts of England, but they are going to drift their way eastwards, then clear away quite quickly on. Otherwise, across many parts of England and Wales, a largely dry start to the day, just a few showers to watch out for. Looking dry across Northern Ireland first thing, a bit cloudier down the eastern side of Scotland, and here there could be some showery outbreaks first thing, but towards more central western areas it should get off to a largely bright and sunny start tomorrow morning. As we go through the rest of the day, there will be a scattering of showers around. Some of them could be a little bit on the heavy side, but not looking as intense or as thundery as those that we've seen through today, and most places probably going to avoid the showers and actually stay largely dry, with a good deal of bright or sunny weather developing. And with that sunshine and temperatures a little bit higher than today, it is going to feel a bit warmer for many of us as well. A few showers continuing as we go through tomorrow evening, but generally they're going to ease out, and so that will take us through a dry night into Wednesday. And there's more dry weather to come as we go through Wednesday itself for many. Again, some bright sunny skies before some wet weather pushes its way in on Thursday. Heaviest rain in the south. See you later.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm John Vincent. Queues on the M62 westbound in Cheshire. It's all due to an accident involving 3 lorries between junction 11 Birchwood and 10 the Croft interchange. Queuing traffic on the M1 in both directions between Derbyshire and Nottinghamshire. It's all due to an accident between junction 27 Hucknall and 28 for Alfreton. Delays on the M42 southbound in Staffordshire. It's all due to a broken down vehicle and fuel spillage at junction 10 for Tamworth. Long delays on the M25 clockwise in Surrey due to recovery work following a vehicle fire at junction 11 for Chertsey. Delays on the M5 southbound in Somerset due to emergency barrier repairs following an earlier accident between junction 24 Bridgewater South and 25 Taunton. And slow for the M4 westbound in Berkshire due to an earlier accident just after junction 13 Chieveley. And that's the latest traffic and travel news.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Welcome back. Your time is 4:37. I'm Martin Daubney, and this is GB News. Now, a reminder that we're set to hear from US Vice President Kamala Harris very shortly. It'll be her first speech since Joe Biden announced he was quitting the presidential race yesterday. You can see live pictures there from the White House. The Vice President due there shortly. In the meantime, I'm joined by the US political analyst Eric Ham. Eric, welcome to the show. So as we await the first public engagement from Kamala Harris since Joe Biden quit yesterday, before that, Eric, can we just have a quick look back to an astonishing cross-examination earlier on? About an hour ago it began. Kimberly Cheetle, the director of US Secret Service, a bruising, eviscerating session. She was asked so many questions, and the people in the room certainly felt she didn't really give many answers. And the culmination of that, which struck me as incredible, one of the cross-examiners said, "Because Donald Trump is alive today, you look incompetent. If he died, you'd be culpable. Joe Biden needs to fire you." What's your take?
It was a stunning moment for the head of the Secret Service because, well, of course, we all knew that she was going to be on the hot seat. And of course, we all knew that there were a number of probing questions that she would need to answer as a result of what took place. Look, the United States hasn't seen an attempt on the life of a president or former president in over 40 years. And so these are questions that she needed to answer. And it was stunning how incapable she seemed to be able to not only answer the questions that were put before her, but also didn't really provide any confidence that she could continue to not only protect the key principles, but given where the nation is right now and the fluidity of our political situation, where is the Secret Service and can it do the job? Is it up to the job? And based on what we saw today, I think there's still more questions about that.
OK, Eric, let's quickly move on. We're all still awaiting Kamala Harris to appear outside the White House. What do you anticipate that we'll hear from this speech? We've seen some early glimpses already today. She's coming out saying her people are saying Kamala Harris stands up to fraudsters and criminals. Donald Trump is a convicted felon. It seems, Eric Ham, the unity politics lasted precisely 1 week.
If they lasted that long, and quite frankly, even then, I thought that was a myth. But look, Kamala Harris is a former successful prosecutor. She served as the Attorney General for the state of California. And for the viewers, the state of California has the largest Attorney General's office outside of the federal Attorney General's office. So it's the second biggest Attorney General's office in the country, only behind that of the U.S. Department of Justice. And so she actually led that department in the state of California. And what she is going to do now, as someone who is seeing who will be the replacement at the top of the ticket, she is going to lean into her prosecutorial skills as she runs for president against Donald Trump. And what we are being told is they are going to position this, Kamala Harris's people, as the prosecutor versus the felon. And that is how they're going to actually run this race. And that is what we can expect to see now through November.
Well, Eric Ham, as we await Kamala Harris to appear, it's worth noting Joe Biden has endorsed her, Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton has, other candidates standing aside, but some big names yet to rubber stamp Kamala Harris, mainly, of course, Barack Obama, believed to be the kingmaker in all of this. Is today ostensibly Kamala Harris's pitch? Do we think that we might see some movement from the Obama team after today's speech, or will this roll on throughout the days and weeks ahead?
I think it's going to, if the Obamas are going to make an endorsement, they need to do it sooner rather than later. And that also goes for former Speaker Nancy Pelosi, as well as the Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, because they were seen as instrumental in leading this push to remove President Biden from the top of the ticket. And so right now, their legacies are not looking very good today. And because this is still seen as a party in disarray, a party that technically does not have anyone at the top, what needs to happen is they need to actually decide, are they going to get behind her, especially considering many of those high-profile names who many thought could actually step in have already gotten behind Kamala Harris's candidacy as the presidential nominee for the Democratic Party.
Eric, I think we're just about to start at the White House, but quickly ahead of that, do you think this will impact Donald Trump's chances of winning in November? He says he's going to beat her, that Kamala Harris is going to be easier to beat than Joe Biden. What's the polling looking like?
I think very quickly, Democrats gave up their biggest asset, and that is the power of incumbency. And so I do believe that makes it easier for Donald Trump to actually win in November. Polling data actually shows that right now Kamala Harris is actually more competitive with Donald Trump than Joe Biden. But of course, that could just be a momentary bump. We'll still have to see how this plays out in the weeks ahead.
And we still have a bit more time before Kamala Harris appears, Eric. So no, she's just emerging now. We have to leave her there. Eric Ham, let's go to the White House. Kamala Harris addressing the nation. Here she is.
Good morning. Good morning. I'm Linda Teeler, Senior Vice President for Championships at the NCAA. You've been asked to sit, please. I'd like to thank President Biden and Vice President Harris for organizing this event today. This is an incredible backdrop to celebrate incredible achievement. I want to start by congratulating all of you on your successful season. There are more than 500 student athletes in more than 1,000 NCAA institutions across the country. Many of those teams and student athletes started the season with the goal of achieving a national championship. You all have done that. You're the best in your sport. You've crossed that finish line. You will forever be NCAA champions. Congratulations. For the student athletes here, I hope that you take a moment to truly appreciate what you've achieved. Whether it's your first NCAA championship or one of many, what you've done is remarkable. In addition to your success on the field, many of you are using your platform that success has brought to do really incredible things, to engage your communities, to become entrepreneurs, to represent your families and your friends, to serve in leadership roles across the NCAA, at your conference, and on your campus. What you do and how you do it is an inspiration, and we thank you. For the coaches here today, I hope you also take a moment to truly appreciate the season. I know for many of you, it is natural, it's in your nature to turn the page, look to the next season, start planning for the next championship. But for all of you, I hope that you, again, take a moment to truly appreciate what you've accomplished. It is incredible, and you also will forever be known as national championship coaches. Congratulations. Having worked on a college campus for over 21 years, I understand that it takes teamwork to make this particular dream work. And so I want to make sure we shout out those athletic trainers, medical personnel, strength and conditioning coaches. Yeah, let's go, right? Academic advisors, media relations folks, all of you that make this possible for student athletes to achieve their dreams. Thank you for what you do. Thank you for pouring into them and how you do it, taking care of them and loving them and supporting them in every way. Thank you. Again, thank you for allowing us to celebrate you today, for being here, making the trip. We appreciate it, and we appreciate being part of your special day. And now it's my distinct honor to introduce the Vice President of the United States, Kamala Harris.
Greetings, everyone. Greetings. And Linda, I want to thank you for all you do to support these extraordinary student athletes. And it is good to be here with so many leaders, including, of course, members of Congress, members of our administration, and our extraordinary athletes. Our president, Joe Biden, wanted to be here today. He is feeling much better and recovering fast, and he looks forward to getting back on the road. And I wanted to say a few words about our president. Joe Biden's legacy of accomplishment over the past 3 years is unmatched in modern history. In one term, he has already, yes, you may clap. In one term, he has already surpassed the legacy of most presidents who have served 2 terms in office. And I first came to know President Biden through his son, Beau. We worked together as attorneys general in our states, and back then, Beau would often tell me stories about his dad. He would talk about the kind of father and the kind of man that Joe Biden is. The qualities that Beau revered in his father are the same qualities that I have seen every day in our president. His honesty, his integrity, his commitment to his faith and his family, his big heart, and his love, deep love of our country. And I am firsthand witness that every day our President Joe Biden fights for the American people, and we are deeply, deeply grateful for his service to our nation. And so with that, on behalf of our President and Dr. Biden, I am honored to welcome all of you to the White House to celebrate the achievements of these great athletes. Every one of them is a national champion, a national champion. In America, tens of millions of people play a sport as a child. and the best of the best grow up to become national champions. Here today, we have 7 undefeated teams, 11 repeat champions, and 20 first-time winners. Some of you have represented our nation on the international stage in World Cups and World Championships. And later this month, 6 of you will represent our nation at the 2024 Olympics in Paris. As members of Team USA, you are ambassadors for our nation, and with pride, we will cheer you on. And we look forward to congratulating you when you bring home the gold. So to all of our athletes, I know it was not easy to make it to this moment. Each of you has faced challenges and obstacles, and you have endured. You have fought back and fought through. By doing so, you demonstrated that true greatness requires more than skill. It requires grit and determination. You all know what it means to commit and to persevere. And you know what it means to count on teammates. During the course of a long season, sports teams become a family. You rely on each other. You develop relationships that will last a lifetime. And you make the people around you better in every way. And when you play, you inspire people across our nation. You remind all of us what can be achieved with hard work and ambition. And of course, none of you made it here alone. Today, you are surrounded by the people who stood by you every step of this journey. The folks who support you on and off the field, your friends, your family members, your coaches, your trainers, and teachers who for years have cheered you on. So today, again, let us give them a round of applause. And in conclusion, I say to our athletes, congratulations again on all you have accomplished, and good luck on all that is to come. Wherever you all go from here, you will always, and know this, you will always be champions, and we will always be so proud of you. And so now it is my honor to welcome to the stage Jordan Dudley, who plays on the Florida State University women's soccer team and our U20 women's national team. Please welcome Jordan.
Okay, we're just going to cut back to that later in the show. That was Kamala Harris there, her first address on the steps of the White House, introducing some athletes. Let's have a quick look back over an extraordinary afternoon in US politics. Just starting with a quick summary there of what Kamala Harris said at the start. She kept referring to Joe Biden as our president. Of course, he is still the president of the USA until November the 5th. This is about who's going to be the Democrat nominee. He hasn't stood down or resigned. She said Joe Biden wanted to be here today. He is recovering well. Of course, he has COVID-19. I want to celebrate Joe Biden, his honesty, his integrity, his commitment to faith and family, and his big heart and love of our country. At that point, a few people started to clap, and she said, yes, you can clap. At that point, she then moved on to the athletes in the audience, and we'll cut back to her when she starts to make an address, which many believe will be her pitch for the job, because, of course, she hasn't yet been, this coronation hasn't happened. Joe Biden has endorsed her. The Clintons have endorsed her. Other candidates said they will stand aside. But it's not a fait accompli. She isn't yet the nomination on the #1 ticket for the Democrat Party. And Barack Obama, who was believed to be absolutely instrumental in finally convincing Joe Biden it was best for him, best for the Democrat Party, best for America, perhaps best for the world, that Joe Biden stood down. Barack Obama hasn't yet endorsed Kamala Harris. Let's see if that comes over the next few days. And earlier on in the show, very quickly, Kimberly Cheadle, of course, who was the director of the US Secret Service on July the 13th, that astonishing assassination attempt on Donald Trump's life, was brutally cross-examined in Washington, D.C. on Capitol Hill. And the questions were just relentless. One was this: why wasn't a Secret Service agent on the roof? Of course, to counter the sniper. There was a plan in place to provide overwatch, but we can't go into the operational details today. She was heckled, she was booed. It was a brutal session. We'll have full analysis on that after this, including we'll go back to the White House and pick up on Kamala Harris's speech on the steps of the White House, expected to be her pitch for the vice president nomination for the Democrat Party. Loads to come up. Make sure you don't go away. Now let's have your weather, and it's Alex Burker.
Warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again. I'm here with your latest GB News weather update, coming to you from the Met Office. Looking ahead through much of this week, it is going to be quite changeable. So some wet weather at times, but also something a bit drier to come too. In fact, as we go through the end of today, it's going to turn a little bit drier for many of us because the system that has brought the earlier cloud and rain is clearing away. That being said, still quite a few showers across parts of Scotland as we go through the end of the afternoon and into the evening. Some heavy, possibly even thundery, but most of these will start to ease and clear away overnight, and then some pulses of rain pushing into parts of southwest England and Wales, but otherwise some dry and at times clear weather to come. But despite the clear skies, temperatures not dropping a huge amount. Another warm night for many of us. Watch out for some heavy pulses of rain first thing tomorrow morning, initially across central southern parts of England, but they are going to drift their way eastwards, then clear away quite quickly on. Otherwise, across many parts of England and Wales, a largely dry start to the day, just a few showers to watch out for. Looking dry across Northern Ireland first thing, a bit cloudier down the eastern side of Scotland, and here there could be some showery outbreaks first thing, but towards more central western areas it should get off to a largely bright and sunny start tomorrow morning. As we go through the rest of the day, there will be a scattering of showers around. Some of them could be a little bit on the heavy side, but not looking as intense or as thundery as those that we've seen through today, and most places probably going to avoid the showers and actually stay largely dry, with a good deal of bright or sunny weather developing. And with that sunshine and temperatures a little bit higher than today, it is going to feel a bit warmer for many of us as well. A few showers continuing as we go through tomorrow evening, but generally they're going to ease out, and so that will take us through a dry night into Wednesday. And there's more dry weather to come as we go through Wednesday itself for many. Again, some bright sunny skies before some wet weather pushes its way in on Thursday. Heaviest rain in the south. See you later.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm John Vincent. Queues on the M42 southbound in Staffordshire. It's all due to a broken down vehicle and fuel spillage at junction 10 for Tamworth. Queues on the M25 in Surrey. Firstly, clockwise, long delays due to an earlier vehicle fire at junction 11 Chertsey. Anti-clockwise, we've got 2 lanes closed for a broken down lorry between junction 11 Chertsey and 10 the Wisley interchange. Long delays on the M5 southbound in Somerset due to emergency barrier repairs following an earlier accident between junction 24 Bridgewater South and 25 Taunton. Congestion in Kent, firstly slow for the M25 anti-clockwise at the Dartford tunnels. We're also seeing queues on the M26 westbound in the roadworks just before the M25, and the A38 Devon Expressway westbound has been closed for recovery work following a fuel spillage and earlier crane fire. A complex recovery is ongoing.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Don't miss your chance to win our Super Summer Giveaway. With your chance to win £30,000 cash, our biggest cash prize to date, which means you get to spend every single penny however you like. What plans would you make with an extra £30,000 cash in your bank account? Take your family on the ultimate holiday, buy that treat that's always seemed out of reach, or just put it in the bank for a later date. However you'd spend it, make sure you don't miss out. For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text CASH to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2 or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
A very, very good afternoon to you. It's 5 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News. We're broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster, all across the UK. On today's show, absolutely extraordinary scenes in the US. The House of Representatives Oversight Committee is currently grilling the Secret Service Director, Kimberly Cheatle, over security lapses that allowed the assassination attempt on Donald Trump. You can see her on your screens live now. These are live pictures from Washington, D.C. We'll have the full analysis of that throughout the rest of this hour. And meanwhile, Vice President Kamala Harris has spoken publicly just the day after Joe Biden dropped out of the presidential race and endorsed her. We'll have full details on that too. And a complete change of gear, we'll catch up with all of the day's royal news as the second in line to the throne, Prince George, celebrates his 11th birthday with that simply wonderful family photograph. And that's all coming up between now and 6 o'clock. Well, to the show, an absolutely astonishing afternoon of politics in America. The cross-examination of Kimberly Cheatle was eviscerating. It was brutal. At times, it felt merciless. Question after question after question about her competence, about the bungles during that assassination attempt of Donald Trump on July the 13th. She said at the start, on July the 13th, we failed. The questioning went on and on and on. It was simply astonishing. She seemed to have next to no answers to basic questions. In fact, that was pointed out to her repeatedly. And when she was asked specifics, she said, I can't go into details. We don't yet have them. We'll have the full analysis on that. It was simply incredible. Send your views and post your comments by visiting gbnews.com/you'll say. But now it's your headlines. It's Polly Middlehurst.
Martin, thank you, and good evening to you. Well, as you've been hearing, the head of the US Secret Service has admitted to a House committee today that the attempt to assassinate Donald Trump was the most significant operational failure for decades. If you're watching on television, that congressional committee meeting continuing in Washington today, we can see Senator Biggs there is on the stand asking further questions in that line of inquiry. Well, the head of the Secret Service, Kimberly Cheatle, was on the stand earlier. She's been testifying in an effort to explain herself following that attempt on Donald Trump's life. She was being questioned about the security lapses that allowed a lone rifleman to successfully take aim at the former president, saying she takes full responsibility for what went wrong.
The assassination attempt of former President Donald Trump on July 13th is the most significant operational failure of the Secret Service in decades, and I am keeping him and his family in my thoughts. The Secret Service's solemn mission is to protect our nation's leaders. On July 13th, we failed.
Kimberly Cheadle speaking there. Meanwhile, financial donations to the US Democratic Party have surged after President Biden's announcement that he's stepping down from the US presidential race. In an online statement issued yesterday, Joe Biden endorsed his VP, Kamala Harris, as his favourite candidate for president. But similar endorsements were significantly missing from former President Obama and prominent Republican Nancy Pelosi. That comes after he faced increasing calls to step down despite his poor debate performance against the Republican Donald Trump last month. Here, though, the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, has praised Joe Biden.
A man who, during 5 decades of service, never lost touch with the concerns of working people and always put his country first. A true friend of the Labour movement, his presidency will leave a legacy that extends far beyond America to freedom and security on this continent.
Now, in news here at home, an 11-year-old girl has been left orphaned following a crash which killed 4 members of her family, as well as a motorcyclist and their pillion passenger. It all happened in West Yorkshire. Shane Roller and his partner, Shannon Morgan, and their little girls, Lily and Ruby, died on the A61 near Wakefield when their Ford Focus car was in collision with that motorbike. A fundraiser's now been set up for 11-year-old Poppy, who wasn't in the car when it crashed. That fundraising page had reached £30,000 by lunchtime. The scene of the crash has remained closed today. Police investigations are ongoing. Superintendent Alan Travis from West Yorkshire Police said it's an absolutely tragic incident which has resulted in the deaths of 6 lives. Now, the Home Secretary said today, she was telling the Commons, that the Rwanda scheme has cost the British taxpayer £700 million. Yvette Cooper described the migrant deterrence scheme as the most shocking waste of taxpayer money she'd ever seen. She said she'd take urgent action to start clearing the asylum backlog in one simple change that she said would save the taxpayer an estimated £7 billion over the next 10 years. It's after nearly 1,500 migrants arrived in the UK after a busy week of crossings in the English Channel last week. The Prime Minister set out plans to cut reliance on foreign workers by improving skills training in England. It's called Skills England. It was a manifesto pledge from Labour and is designed to fix the fragmented and broken training systems, according to Labour. Well, in a speech today, the Prime Minister argued that a new approach is needed to reduce the need for immigration in certain industrial sectors. But the Conservatives have warned that plan to redirect cash could, in fact, cut the number of apprenticeships on offer. And as you've been hearing, the Prince and Princess of Wales have shared a new picture of Prince George to mark his 11th birthday. If you're watching on television, take a look at this classy shot in black and white taken by his mother and posted on Kensington Palace's social media accounts. It shows the future king smiling, wearing a white shirt and a dark blazer in a shot taken from slightly above. Happy birthday, George. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Polly Middlehurst. I'm back in half an hour. See you then.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you very much, Polly. Now, there's only one place to start, and that's the fallout from a hugely dramatic day in US politics. US Vice President Kamala Harris has spoken publicly for the first time since she received Joe Biden's endorsement to be the Democrats' nominee for the presidential election in November, paying tribute to what she called the president's unmatched legacy of accomplishment. Meanwhile, the director of the US Secret Service, Kimberly Cheadle, has faced a brutal cross-examination by a House committee following the attempted assassination of Donald Trump. She was accused of cutting corners on the former president's security and was urged to resign. Well, to chew over that, I'm now joined by the former Deputy Assistant to Donald Trump, Sebastian Corker. Seb, it's always an absolute pleasure to have your company. Can we start, Seb, can we start with the cross-examination of Kimberly Cheadle earlier on today? I don't think Seb can quite hear us yet. We'll try and get a link with him and go back to him in a moment. I wanted to go over some of the detail of that cross-examination. It was absolutely savage at times, utterly savage. She said at the top of that, of course, she's the director of Secret Services responsible for the security detail on July the 13th in Pennsylvania at that Trump rally. And she started by saying, on July the 13th, we failed. She then went on to, she was asked, why wasn't a Secret Service agent on the roof? And, of course, there was the sniper on the roof who took the shot at Donald Trump and by millimetres failed to take Donald Trump's life. He said there was a plan in place to provide overwatch, but we can't go into operational details. She repeatedly kept saying, we can't go into details. The crowd became very unrestful at that. They were heckling, they were booing, they weren't happy by the lack of detail given. A key question, an astonishing question and answer was this. She was asked, why was the president allowed to take to the stage when you knew a suspicious man was on the roof? And she answered, we didn't know he was dangerous. There was an audible gasp in the room at this point. She was repeatedly asked if any access for security details, any extra requests were refused. Again, she kept saying the requests were honoured, but she failed to go into any detail. She then said, I'm here today because I want to have questions answered. That was one of the... He said, I don't think you've answered a single question here today. And one of the cross-examiners just brutally said the following, Donald Trump is alive today and you look incompetent. If he died, you'd be culpable. And she looked absolutely well questioning. Her eyes were wide. She just looked astonished about what was happening to her. It was quite a political attack. It was very personal. That was noticeable. But the fact of the matter is, so how many? And again, at that point, she didn't have answers. Have the agents recreated the shooter moments over the past days? Have you traced his movements over the past months? So basically, have you managed to ascertain where he came from, what he was doing? Ongoing, again, getting grown. Were these requests for additional resources honoured? The requests were honoured, but she wouldn't, again, go into any detail. Flagged, she admitted that a man was flagged to her by police, by agents, but at that point, nothing was done. And when you knew a suspicious man was on the roof, and as I said, we didn't know he was dangerous. We're going to try and establish contact with Seb Gorka. We'll have full analysis on that later, but now let's go to a break.
Tune in to Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. GB News royalty with your perfect start to the weekend. Lucky us. Feisty and fearless guests.
Well, I'm a normal person, so ask me.
Honest opinions
that raises more questions than a Gary Barlow tax return.
And a few surprises along the way.
Might be cold in this studio.
That is Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. 8 to 9 only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg's State of the Nation, Monday to Thursday from 8 p.m.
Well, I'm joined now by royal biographer and former royal photographer, Ian Lloyd. Ian,
hello, Jacob. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you for joining me. This is going to be great, isn't it? The opportunity to go around and see where the King comes onto the balcony from. Really interesting insight to how Buckingham Palace works.
It's exciting. I went yesterday, there was a press preview, and the thing that struck me first of all is that if you're the King and or the late Queen and you're on the balcony, you can't see the Mall. I mean, we all see people coming down from the top, thousands of people crowding in towards Buckingham Palace. They can't see it because of this great monument to Queen Victoria called the Queen Victoria Memorial, or they call it the wedding cake, but it blocks the view. So apparently the King has a TV in there. and the late Queen did as well. So what they do is they when they're waiting to come on, they're watching the TV to see how the crowd's getting nearer the palace. And the other thing that struck me is when we were on it looking down, is you can actually see individual faces in the crowd out there, because we looked out, so they do get a good view of what's happening directly underneath the palace,
So they can see individuals. So if there's a friendly face in the crowd, they can see that person and possibly even wave. But they can't see that enormous mass of people you get at the big events that goes back towards Admiralty Arch.
The other thing I learned is there's a great historical link, because the person that put the east wing on the palace, because it was originally 3 sides, and Queen Victoria had, of course, 9 children, so they had to build a 4th side for all the nurseries and things. Edward Blord was the architect, but the master builder was Thomas Cubitt.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
In World War I, 309 men from Britain and the Commonwealth never came home because they'd been shot at dawn. The majority were killed for desertion, cowardice and sleeping at post. Appearing at their court-martials and told they'd brought shame on their country, these men had no opportunity to defend themselves and were executed by a firing squad. The National Memorial Arboretum launched a fundraising campaign to restore the memorial, which has stood for more than 20 years.
Thank you to your viewers for their support for the fundraising campaign, and thanks to the generosity of so many people, we've been able to replace all 309 of the posts that represent those young men that were shot in the First World War. Restoration of this really precious memorial.
The centrepiece of the memorial is the young soldier, blindfolded and facing his execution. In September 1916, Private Harry Farr was ordered to the front. Already suffering from shell shock, he was overwhelmed and refused his orders. He was court-martialed, and in a trial lasting only 20 minutes, he was sentenced to death. On the day of his execution, he faced the firing squad without a blindfold. Janet Booth is Private Farr's granddaughter and was part of the public campaign to have those who were shot at dawn officially pardoned.
When I asked my gran, do you know where I could find Harry's grave? And she looked at my mother, and there was this sort of look between them, and then she said, well, he hasn't got a grave because they didn't warrant, he deserved one because he was shot as a coward and had let his country down. We can come here as a family and pay our respects to him, and also for all the other families, it's somewhere to come and remember their loved ones.
The People's Channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
As time passes,
She could have said storm.
You made my argument for me.
My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
It went everywhere.
something practical could be done.
Or I can become something different. Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
British giveaway. It's our biggest cash prize of the year. Now, what would you do with all that extra cash? Well, here's how you could win the lot. OK, that isn't happening, so let's try and quickly move on now. Last week, we brought you news of a shocking report that found that the number of migrants to the European Union had more than doubled in just 5 years. And today, it's emerged that there were more than 1 million asylum applicants in the European Union last year alone. Now, the figure was 631,000 in 2019. And although it fell over the next 2 years due to COVID, of course, it hit almost 1.05 million in 2023. Now, that's a rise, a shocking rise of 66%. And I'm now joined by Lee Evans, who's the chairman of facts4eu.org. Lee, are you there? Lee isn't there. Right, we've got a few technical gremlins here. I'm going to talk you through some of this data until we can get Lee Evans up. So, like I say, last week we brought you the report. 1.265 million illegal immigrants to all of the 27 EU member states when you add them up. That's just the illegal immigration. This is European Commission data that's released at the end of each year. Lee Evans crunched that data, and this shows the truly astonishing nature, the true size of illegal immigration to the European Union. Last week, Lee Evans and myself concluded if the European Union cannot control its own borders, if they're so porous to illegal migrants, what chance do they ever have of stopping that mass of people inexorably moving towards the French coast? Well, today's report is the numbers of asylum applicants, first-time applicants, so fresh arrivals to the European Union. Lee Evans, I believe, is now with us to talk it through. Lee, are you there? Lee Evans is there. Lee Evans, the chairman of facts4eu.org. Mercifully, we get you on. So the second report in 2 weeks, Lee, casting a harsh light over the numbers piling into the European Union. I went over the illegal migration figures a short while ago. Today's report, published by yourself, is the number of first-time asylum seekers. Talk through the shocking numbers and talk us, Lee Evans, through the growth.
Yeah, well, it seems not to matter where you look in the migration statistics in the EU, and I'll come on to why that's important to your audience in a moment. But no matter where you look, the numbers are just shocking. So I assume you've mentioned the fact that the numbers of illegal migrants into the EU in the last 5 years doubled. 1.25 million just in the last year alone. Which is an extraordinary number of people. When it comes to asylum, which is what we looked at in our report today, and it's a great team effort that's been punching these numbers because the EU Commission doesn't make it easy. But anyway, the numbers are 3.5 million in 5 years. And those numbers show a 66% growth in those 5 years. So whether it's illegals that are avoiding the asylum system, or whether it's people that are being forced to enter the asylum system, vast numbers are backing up in Europe. And of course, we all know, you're showing a picture there at the moment of a boat taking illegal migrants across to the UK. The more migrants there are in Europe, the greater the pressure there will be on the southern borders of the United Kingdom. And if you look at the latest figures, we are looking at the worst set of figures since this whole thing began in 2018. And I can give you one extra fact, Martin, that you and your audience might find interesting. Everyone knows that numbers are increasing. What people may not know is that on Saturday, 2 days ago, we broke the 130,000 mark, 130,000 mark for these illegal migrants coming to the UK since this problem began. And these are undocumented people. We don't know who they are. We know that the vast majority of them are male, but we have no idea of their background, their history, even their names or nationalities, because they throw all of those overboard. So, one of the
Lee, if I may interject, another key figure that leaps out of your excellent report is those who are still in the system, backed up, awaiting processing. Now, that's an additional 1.17 million who are awaiting their claims. You add all of these numbers together, you're at the thick end of 5 million, Lee Evans. And my next question to you is quite simple. If they're in the system in the European Union, if they're being processed or they're trying to apply for asylum in the European Union, why is that a problem for Britain? I mean, if they're going to stay in the EU, isn't that, that's where they want to be? That's fine. Or am I being naive? Are they still claiming asylum in the EU, but then still making their way towards the French coast?
That's it. The problem that we have is that the UK is a major draw for many of these migrants. If you ask any group where they want to settle, there are two answers generally: Germany and the UK. And so we are one of the draws for these migrants. If they get denied asylum, which, by the way, most of them do, and we're producing our final report, which will include that information of rejections and just how many of these are being deported. And I've had a sneak look at the numbers, and I can tell you, you're going to be shocked about that one too, Martin. So it doesn't matter whether these people are forced to apply for asylum in the EU or not, which is the subject of our report today. That doesn't matter, because they can still up sticks and head for the northern French coast. And the key thing is just the sheer volumes are such that when you look at Keir Starmer's plans, his latest plan last week, as you know, was to effectively bypass the EU and give £84 million of taxpayers' money to Africa and the Middle East, in some hope that by doing that, migrants wouldn't leave there. But where are they leaving there for? They're leaving there for the EU. So it's the EU's responsibility to deal with that. We shouldn't be paying for it. So they're coming to the EU, and then a proportion of those, a significant proportion and a growing proportion, are coming to the UK. And the ones that are coming to the
I need to interject again. You make valid points. All of this, by the way, is the European Commission's own data. This is their own official data. This isn't cooked out of nowhere. This is the data that they published. This data came out on Friday, and you've processed it over the weekend. This is just the truth. This is their own data. I want to ask you a simple question. You say there that two countries stand out above all others as the magnetic draw, Germany and the United Kingdom. What is it, Lee, about those two countries? What do they have in common that makes them so attractive? And let's mainly focus on the United Kingdom. What is it about the UK that is so attractive to these asylum seekers and illegal immigrants?
It is the fact that, frankly, we treat them better than pretty much any other country does. They come over, they get they've thrown their iPhones into the water on the way over. They get a new iPhone. They're paid a cash amount every week. They get food. They get lodging, and they're not forced to work. And they get put up in 4-star hotels. So what's not to like?
And Lee, have you heard anything I know it's very early days. Let's give credit where it's due. It's very early days into the Labour government, into Sir Keir Starmer's stewardship, prime ministership of the country. But have you heard anything yet from the Labour Party which you think might deter people making this perilous journey, which might deter that magnetic pull to the United Kingdom, or actually has something else happened by scrapping Rwanda, by getting rid of that deterrent, that offshore deterrent? Do you think actually the United Kingdom might be more appealing now than it was even a couple of weeks ago?
I think it most certainly is more appealing now than it was 2 weeks ago. Was it 17 days he's been in office now, something like that? And almost his first act was to scrap Rwanda. Now, up until that point, as you know, a lot of migrants were in fact travelling from the UK to the Republic of Ireland because they were worried about being deported to Rwanda. And you've reported, GBNews has reported the protests that are going on in Ireland now about all these migrants and where they're going to be situated. So there was an immediate effect of what you might call a Rwanda deterrent. Sadly, it affected our neighbours in the Republic of Ireland, but nevertheless, it shows the power of these sorts of things. Now that's scrapped, and there are now no targets. The Labour government refuses to put any figures on any potential reductions. All we've done, because we're non-partisan, we're not anti-Labour, all we've done is in these set of reports, we've shown the extent of the problem. And you've kindly highlighted that, doubling of the number of illegal migrants entering the EU in the last 5 years, 66% increase in asylum seekers in the EU in that time, more than 1 million backed up in the system in the EU, waiting on decisions. And as we will show in our final report on this, looking at how many are rejected and how many are deported, I'm afraid, Martin, like you as I do, I'm going to have even worse news for you.
OK, well, I mean, again, it's news that we have to share no matter how unpleasant, because we have to keep highlighting this issue. Otherwise, I fear it will never, ever change. Lee Evans, thanks for bearing with us. We had a few issues there, but thanks for coming on the show, as always. And let's get you on again for that final part of that report, even though it may be grim reading. Lee Evans is the chairman of facts4eu.org. It's always a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you. Now, still lots more to come between now and 6 o'clock, and there's a warning from economists that households could see yet another energy bill rise, this time going up by almost £200 a year. I thought energy bills were going to go down with this Green New Deal. Apparently not. Anyway, here's your headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
At 5:30 on GB News, the headlines this hour: the head of the US Secret Service has admitted to a House committee that the attempt to assassinate Donald Trump was the most significant operational failure for decades. Kimberly Cheetle has been questioned about the security lapses that allowed a lone rifleman to successfully take aim at Donald Trump, saying that she took full responsibility for what went wrong. Meanwhile, financial donations to the US Democratic Party have surged after President Biden announced he's stepping down from the US presidential race. In an online statement issued yesterday, Joe Biden endorsed his VP, Kamala Harris, as his favourite for president. It comes after he faced increasing calls to step aside since his poor debate performance against Republican Donald Trump last month. And here at home, the Home Secretary has told the Commons that the Rwanda scheme cost the British taxpayer £700 million. Yvette Cooper described the migrant deterrent scheme as the most shocking waste of taxpayer money she'd ever seen. She said she'd take urgent action to start clearing the asylum backlog in one simple change that she said would save the taxpayer an estimated £7 billion over the next 10 years. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Polly Middlehurst. I'm back in half an hour with more.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report. Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Thank you, Polly. Now, I've had hundreds of your says come in, and the number one thing that's really piqued your interest today has been that astonishing, brutal, eviscerating cross-examination of Kimberly Cheetle, who, of course, is the US Secret Service Director. There's a cross-examination, beg your pardon, at Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. Lynn says this: I absolutely loved that thorough and brutal questioning. I wish we had similar down-to-business attitudes like that here. When you compare the watered-down performances we have at the COVID inquiry or Partygate and many other similar events. I totally loved it. They know how to get things done in America. Now, talking about totally loving it and knowing how to do it, here's Michelle Dewberry, Jubes & Co., of course, 6 till 7, the queen of primetime political debate. Jubes, what's on your menu?
Hello, Martin. Well, everything that you would expect. I'll pick up on that conversation that you've just been having there about that cross-examining. Also, many people now saying that Biden needs to stand down immediately, does he? And more importantly, what does all this mean for the UK here? Does it make a victory for Trump more likely? And how would that play out with a Labour government here? I want to look at the skills strategy that was announced today as well. And a really interesting story that I saw. We all know that antisocial behaviour, Martin, is an absolute blight on society. But what do you do about it? Well, in Grimsby, they're going to trial this new system where they're going to be blasting out the rules of the land over big mega speakers every 15 minutes. And I wonder, do we think this will actually have any impact? Will it reduce antisocial behaviour? Do you support it or not?
It's a great idea, but most people probably have their headphones on. Michelle Dewberry, Jubes & Co., 6 till 7, always a pleasure. Fantastic. See you later. Now, if you want to get in touch with me at GB News, simply go to gbnews.com/your say, and I'll read out the best of your messages a little later in the show. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello again. I'm here with your latest GB News weather update, coming to you from the Met Office. Looking ahead through much of this week, it is going to be quite changeable. So some wet weather at times, but also something a bit drier to come too. In fact, as we go through the end of today, it's going to turn a little bit drier for many of us because the system that has brought the earlier cloud and rain is clearing away. That being said, still quite a few showers across parts of Scotland as we go through the end of the afternoon and into the evening. Some heavy, possibly even thundery, but most of these will start to ease and clear away overnight, and then some pulses of rain pushing into parts of southwest England and Wales, but otherwise some dry and at times clear weather to come. But despite the clear skies, temperatures not dropping a huge amount. Another warm night for many of us. Watch out for some heavy pulses of rain first thing tomorrow morning, initially across central southern parts of England, but they are going to drift their way eastwards, then clear away quite quickly on. Otherwise, across many parts of England and Wales, a largely dry start to the day, just a few showers to watch out for. Looking dry across Northern Ireland first thing, a bit cloudier down the eastern side of Scotland, and here there could be some showery outbreaks first thing, but towards more central western areas it should get off to a largely bright and sunny start tomorrow morning. As we go through the rest of the day, there will be a scattering of showers around. Some of them could be a little bit on the heavy side, but not looking as intense or as thundery as those that we've seen through today, and most places probably going to avoid the showers and actually stay largely dry, with a good deal of bright or sunny weather developing. And with that sunshine and temperatures a little bit higher than today, it is going to feel a bit warmer for many of us as well. A few showers continuing as we go through tomorrow evening, but generally they're going to ease out, and so that will take us through a dry night into Wednesday. And there's more dry weather to come as we go through Wednesday itself for many. Again, some bright sunny skies before some wet weather pushes its way in on Thursday. Heaviest rain in the south. See you later.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm John Vincent. Queues on the M1 in West Yorkshire. It's been closed in both directions for a police incident between junction 40 Ossett and 41 Cargate, so diversions are signposted. Surrounding routes also looking very slow. M6 southbound in Lancashire has been closed for an accident between junction 33 Lancaster South and 32 the Broughton interchange. Also on the M6, this time northbound in the West Midlands, there's queues for an accident between junction 6 Spaghetti Junction and 7 for Great Bar. Also in the West Midlands, there's congestion on the M42 northbound due to an earlier accident between junction 5 Solihull and 6 Birmingham Airport, and queues on the M42 southbound in Staffordshire due to a broken down vehicle and fuel spillage at junction 10 for Tamworth. And that's the latest traffic and travel news.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Welcome back. Your time is 5:38. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, last week, we covered the disorder in the Leeds suburb of Hare Hills. Police face significant violence, including attacks with bricks and missiles while responding to a child protection matter. Now, very shortly, I'll speak to a grooming gang survivor who is now working as a community journalist, and she's been doing some fantastic work in the wake of those riots. And here she is speaking to a local in the aftermath in Hare Hills.
If them people had been white English people that had been running it and with batons, that had been charging them, that had been horses there, that had got absolutely destroyed. You've seen what they do to, you know, English people when they go down to London and protest peacefully. They all get kettled in, they all get pushed around, abused. It's completely two-tier policing. Everything is two-tier. It matters what colour you are to how the police you. That's simple as that.
Fantastic work, and joining me now is that woman, Sammy Woodhouse, who's a reporter now at Urban Scoop. Sammy, welcome to the show. It's an absolute pleasure to have you. A lot of people will know you best, perhaps, for your astonishingly brave work in exposing the grooming gang scandal. You were part in that, prompting government reports, leading many people to justice. You've spoken out bravely in the past, and now you're doing it again. And you're with Urban Scoop, and you were speaking to locals in the aftermath there in Hare Hills of those astonishing scenes. We saw those riots, the bus burned out. And what struck me about your video now, which has been viewed almost 500,000 times online, is a community that feels neglected, a community that doesn't feel listened to, a community that feels mispoliced, a community that feels second best within Britain, even though they are British and born and bred locally. Sammy Woodhouse, tell me about the deep frustration of forgotten communities like Hare Hills and what they said to you.
Hi, Martin. So, yeah, you know, people are really frustrated, and this is something that hasn't just started in the last few days either. So I've been going around talking to people, which are the working class people. You know, you've had people such as politicians, as media, that have absolutely just branded them under, you know, every horrific name under the sun, as racist, as far right, and they're not. So I started speaking to people at events, going back to Telford, which was held by Tommy Robinson. And, you know, there's people that, as I say, the working class, there were survivors, family members, and they're just so frustrated of never having a voice and feeling like second-class citizens. And, you know, they don't feel listened to by media, by politicians. They have no leadership, and they've had enough. So now they're, you know, organising their own protests to get people to come along and to hear what they have to say.
And Sammy, what struck me was a deep frustration, as you pointed out, in not only not being listened to, but being castigated. We're seeing similar scenes in Dublin at the moment. We're seeing similar scenes in Merseyside. We're seeing similar scenes all over the United Kingdom. Very tolerant communities who've been very open. And in fact, some of the people you spoke to in your video, these people, the guy in that video there, he's married to an immigrant. His kids are mixed race. This is not about being racist, but it's about, Sammy, they were telling you time and time again, this is about a lack of integration in those communities up there in Yorkshire.
Yeah, definitely. And as you say, you know, this is something that's happening all over. And the moment you speak about immigration or grooming gangs or anything, you are just branded as far right and racist. And it's just wrong. You to want to talk about what's happening in our country and to keep children and women safe doesn't make you far right or racist. It means you're a decent human being that wants to live peacefully, safely. And as we know that, you know, there are people coming over to our country. They've got no idea who they are. There's no birth certificates. They're coming from third world countries. They're going around, they're raping and assaulting children and women. And there seems to be no consequences, and people just don't seem to want to care and put a stop to it. And, you know, we need some kind of action, and people are coming together now. There's an upcoming event that I'll also be reporting on, again by Tommy, this Saturday in London. I think there's going to be thousands that attend that. And, you know, people have had enough. And I think they've got a right to be frustrated and to be angry and to want some action.
Now, Sammy, you've obviously had a very traumatic early life. And you've managed to turn that around into something astonishing. You've used your personal experience. Do you think that's what makes you so determined to sort of stick up? Because for so often, for so long, you were ignored. Your voice was silenced. Do you think that what's happened to you, that terrible time that's happened to you, has that given you the resolve now to speak out and be a voice for communities that feel like they're also being ignored and forgotten?
Yeah, definitely, because, when I'm attending these protests, like, the one in Leeds, I am one of them. I am working class. I'm one of those. And when I've been going to the events, I think some people, that recognise me, they know my history. They know that I've not come to, with an agenda or to try and stitch them up anyway. And that's what they feel by mainstream media. We clearly saw ITV turn up to the event and they was very quickly, pushed away. They wasn't welcome. And so I think, or at least I'd like to hope that, when I go along, because I'm one of them, they can trust in that urban school will not, kind of, as I say, kind of stitch them up, because that's exactly what they've had, and edit the videos. And I made it very clear to them, you can say anything that you want. This is your space, it's your platform.
OK, Sammy Woodhouse, thank you so much for joining us, and the best of luck to you. Keep it up. Great work. Pleasure to have your company. Thank you. Now, one of Labour's flagship policies is the creation of Great British Energy. But last month, Rachel Reeves said it would save families up to £300 a year off their energy bills by 2030. However, there's bad news for households today, because economists are warning that the energy price cap could go up by £194 later this year because of the war between Ukraine and Russia still affecting us. Well, joining me now is the former CEO of Energy UK, Angela Knight. Angela, welcome to the show. We were promised our bills would get cheaper. Great British Energy, the Green New Deal, renewables being the future. We were bracing ourselves for a lifetime ahead of cheaper energy bills, and yet here we go again. They're due to get another hike. What's causing it again this time?
Yes, well, if you think that you're going to get cheaper energy bills in the future, well, it's in your dreams, because you simply can't. And the reason that you can't is because of the huge investment that's taking place to turn us from a country that's been dependent on gas and oil to a country that is net zero, i.e. we reduce dramatically our carbon footprint. And none of that comes without a large amount of money being spent on the grid, on nuclear backup, on more renewables, and all that sits on your bill. Now, what we're seeing today is some of that, but this particular number relates to the ongoing war between Ukraine and Russia. And it is targeted at the fact that Ukraine holds very big reserves of gas for Europe. And if there's an interruption in it being able to use those reserves, which are held in storage, to feed into the European pipeline, then that's going to cause a problem for continental Europe. Won't necessarily cause it for us directly in respect of supply, because we've still got the North Sea, but inevitably we are open to disruptions that take place, be it Ukraine or indeed, be it rather further afield, when tankers now have to take a longer route round to get into the EU. However, just as last point, the price was always going to go up this winter. The question was how much. We're never going to go back down to where we are. And as I say, the costs of the energy programme at the accelerated speed which Labour are putting in place equals it's going to cost us more.
OK, new government, same old problems.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Stephen Dixon, and thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Now, we've got a story and a half to tell you and bring you now. Our very own GB News political correspondent, who we love very much, Catherine Foster, joins us in the studio, and she's smiling, but she wasn't smiling for the past few days.
Two of her sons, Matthew and Andrew, were reported missing in Bali.
I got a text from a friend saying, can you give us a call, a bit worried about them. Then spoke to a girl they'd befriended who was in Sweden, but they'd met on their travels. And she told me that they'd gone up the mountain. By the time I found out, they'd been missing for 30 hours. They'd gone up the mountain on the Tuesday night, British time. This was the Thursday morning, without a guide. And they'd told her it was really hard. And she told them to turn back, but they hadn't. And they'd sent screenshots from this app with this trail that they were following on the app, screenshots of the app in case there was a problem, and a Snapchat of a Matthew avatar at the top. And she said, I know they made it to the top because I could see that his phone had nearly died. But the trail had actually closed many years ago. So the app, we will need to make sure that that gets taken off the app. But, you know, technology saved them in the end because it was the screenshots and it was the messages that they'd sent, but they should never have been without a guide.
But what were you doing during those 30 hours that Mum couldn't, when the phone died and Mum couldn't get in touch? Where were you? What were you up to?
Well, we were trying to figure out the best course of action, because it started to pour with rain. The amount of rain created a river, like a stream.
Yeah.
We were like, oh,
yeah,
let's follow the stream downhill, and then the sun set, and we just had to like sleep in the bushes in the jungle.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Isabel Webster. Thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
As time passes,
She could have said storm. You made my argument for me.
My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
Went everywhere.
something practical could be done.
Or I can become something different.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel. I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
As time passes,
She could have said storm. You made my argument for me.
My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
Went everywhere.
something practical could be done.
Or I can become something different.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
As time passes,
She could have said storm. You made my argument for me.
My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
Went everywhere.
something practical could be done.
Or I can become something different.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel. Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Welcome back and thanks for your patience. Now, Kamala Harris gave a hugely anticipated speech today on the steps of the White House, but anticlimactic for those expecting a big announcement. Actually, she paid tribute to our president, Joe Biden. A far more interesting event politically was that earlier, also in Washington, D.C., Kimberly Cheadle, the US Secret Service director, was eviscerated, absolutely eviscerated by a succession of those cross-examining her. They asked her this question about the assassination attempt on Donald Trump on July the 13th. She said, on July the 13th, we failed. She said, why? She was asked, why wasn't a Secret Service agent on the roof? And she didn't have an answer to that question. She was repeatedly asked for details. She didn't have any details on that case beyond those that were operational. And it ended with this: because Donald Trump is alive, you look incompetent. If he died, you'd be culpable. Joe Biden needs to fire you. An astonishing day in politics. Jubes and Co is up next. I'm back doing the GBN tonight, 7 till 8. I'll see you then, but now it's your weather with Alex Burker.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again. I'm here with your latest GB News weather update, coming to you from the Met Office. Looking ahead through much of this week, it is going to be quite changeable. So some wet weather at times, but also something a bit drier to come too. In fact, as we go through the end of today, it's going to turn a little bit drier for many of us because the system that has brought the earlier cloud and rain is clearing away. That being said, still quite a few showers across parts of Scotland as we go through the end of the afternoon and into the evening. Some heavy, possibly even thundery, but most of these will start to ease and clear away overnight, and then some pulses of rain pushing into parts of southwest England and Wales, but otherwise some dry and at times clear weather to come. But despite the clear skies, temperatures not dropping a huge amount. Another warm night for many of us. Watch out for some heavy pulses of rain first thing tomorrow morning, initially across central southern parts of England, but they are going to drift their way eastwards, then clear away quite quickly on. Otherwise, across many parts of England and Wales, a largely dry start to the day, just a few showers to watch out for. Looking dry across Northern Ireland first thing, a bit cloudier down the eastern side of Scotland, and here there could be some showery outbreaks first thing, but towards more central western areas it should get off to a largely bright and sunny start tomorrow.